This is the Hagmann and Hagmann Report for today. It is Thursday, October 24th, 2013. I'm Doug Hagmann, co-host of the Hagmann and Hagmann Report, looking over at yet an empty chair again. Joe won't be joining us tonight. He is actually nursing his mouth tonight. In addition to all of his other issues, he had a dentist appointment today, which just compounded everything. So I told him, I said, you just got to take another night off because he is just in a lot of pain, as is his wife. But his wife is out of the hospital, went back into the hospital, and I believe now will be coming home for good tonight. So thank you for your prayers and your concern. Folks, you're listening to the only show, I believe, where the news is presented to you in three dimensions. We look beyond the bylines and headlines and the fog of deception and bring you the news behind the news for new listeners, and we have many, and I want to welcome you to our show tonight. Just so you know, we broadcast live each and every weeknight from 8 to 11 p.m. Eastern Time. Our home base is HomelandSecurityUS.com, not affiliated with any government agency. That's HomelandSecurityUS.com. Make sure you have HomelandSecurityUS.com. We're also simulcast on the Christians United Broadcasting Network. There you can tune into us at the Hagmann and Hagmann Report.com, and make sure you spell it all out. That's the Hagmann and Hagmann Report.com. Folks, thank you for joining us tonight. We've got a very special show planned for you. On with me right now is none other than my brother in Christ, a guy that I learned so much from every time I talk to him. He is the founder of SteveQuayle.com, and of course it's Steve Quayle, and he's the author of so many books. I'm reading one right now, rereading one right now, True Legends. I got to tell you, folks, what an author, what a prolific author, what a great guy. Steve, welcome.
Hey, good evening, Doug, and welcome everyone. Tonight is going to be a little bit different. We're going to cover a lot of territory. Now, the title for tonight's show, Robin and His D.C. Hoods and the Sheriff of Slaughterham, is based on what we're seeing right now going on. Ladies and gentlemen, I cannot articulate clearer than I'm going to try right now to share with you that our country has been absolutely sold off to the highest bidder. Our deposits in the bank, our capital base, our corporations, everything is being centralized to be controlled. One time, Doug, I made this statement, and those of you who have been listening to me a long time on the radio know it's not even about money. Money ultimately brings the ultimate aphrodisiac, and that's control, our life and death over a person's livelihood and ultimately their being. Now, I also said in the subtitle, which Doug put up on his website, the buzzards are ready to pick your bones. Well, ladies and gentlemen, most people have seen the Western movie. They've seen the classic shot in the cartoon where a vulture is sitting on the sign that says Dead Man's Gulch or some similar thing. And obviously you've seen the cattle skulls, whether it's in a photograph or in a cartoon. But this is no cartoon, ladies and gentlemen, though the response of most people across the United States, and I'd say the majority, is they somehow think they're in a virtual world where none of this stuff will, quote, come home to roost, and let alone the vultures. Now, Doug, I've been chronicling, as the readers all across the country have been sharing with me, and I'm posting on my alerts, this strange animal behavior. And I do believe all truth is parallel. The Bible specifically teaches that there's nothing that happens on earth that doesn't first happen in the heavens. So we know this, that Jesus in the parable of talking about the seed that's sown and who comes to steal it but the birds of the air, the fowls of the air. I believe Jesus was giving us not only a natural viewpoint of what happens, but also a spiritual viewpoint. So tonight, V and I are going to bring you some background on so many different subjects, but here it is, and I'll lay this out. We have heard today from a general that the U.S. military has only divisions, and I stand corrected because I've got so much stuff to talk about, but basically 2 out of 8 are battle ready, and the training has been shut down for 6 months. Now, Doug, I went on record years ago, and what I'm trying to tell people is this: listen to perspective in order to help you focus on your immediate events, or the immediate events are going to be conflicting with your lives, your lifestyles, and your livelihoods. I said that the U.S. military would be taken apart, that they would be financially disemboweled. Use another word, but maybe that's a better word right now, and that all the money that would normally go to the U.S. military is going to Department of Homeland Security. You've all heard about the bullets, the billions of rounds of bullets. You've all heard about the armored personnel carriers. You've all heard about the plans that are in place, the fusion centers, et cetera, and there is no lack of funding for that. Now today comes probably one of the greatest slaps in the face of the U.S. Marine Corps, and God bless each and every Marine out there. The fact is that they're being told their hats have to look more unisex. Now, I believe there's a real image message being sent here, and if you look at them, I put the story up, Doug. I don't know if you've seen them, but they look, you and I talked a little bit, they look like French gendarmerie or the French police hats, but they also look in a scaled-down version like a Navy, whatever, the women in the Navy, their hats, which were always set apart and distinct. Well, ladies and gentlemen, now we have a society that every boundary, every barrier made by the living God, and even the customs and mores accepted by the United States are being changed. And when the entity in the White House made this statement that America is the greatest country in the world and we intend to change all that, you were told probably the only time in his career that he ever told the truth, because what's happened is everything changes. Doug, I'm concerned for the people who are on Social Security. I'm concerned for the people who are on food stamps or EBT cards, and I'm talking about legitimate people, not people that are, selling for booze or drugs, but the people who genuinely need the assistance. Because what we have, and this is not a black statement, it is not a white statement, we have 50 million slaves of the system who can be controlled by their dependence on the system. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, Steve.
And what V and I are trying to get you to understand, I remember, look, it's funny because we got an email saying, can he talk about something different than he talked about last time? Well, if people got what we've been talking about, and me in my case for 20-some years, V in his case for, 8 months or whatever, the point is that more people will be taking action. But I can tell by my emails that come in a given day of people that supposedly listen to us, listen to you, Doug, listen to me, and listen to V when he's on your show, that they're not hearing what we're saying. Now, I don't know what percentage are and the percentage that aren't, but I know there's some say, yeah, I hear you loud and clear. I've got to share the hearing loud and clear emails are dwarfed by well, what does this all mean to me? Or does this mean I won't be able to retire? Now, look, I know that sounds mocking, but yeah, the New World Order has a permanent place for you to retire. It's called into a grave, into a food supplement, or into a camp. You got basically three choices in their world. We have seen 45, and the numbers that were posted on my website in the alert section, 45 came from a Navy flag officer's wife, and it was sent to me through someone else. He knows the person. And the thing that most people are saying, well, there's only 11 or 12 of them. Ladies and gentlemen, 45. There has never been a greater shake-up, shakedown, and you heard today, too, the news, I posted the story, maybe it was yesterday or today, but basically the Air Force is taking out their oath to God because a nameless group complained. Well, I can guarantee you the nameless group would have no problem if, they were praying in the name of Allah. And so what we're talking about now is our borders, our language, our culture, our heritage, our history, our finances, our hope, our dreams for the future are being systematically destroyed, and that there is literally nothing left but sinking sand in the world. But on Jesus Christ, the solid rock I stand. Now the words to that hymn come into play. All other ground is sinking sand. We're going to talk tonight about the things that you're going to need to look to. I think V is going to bring some historic perspective to show you how this is what's going on in the United States is nothing more that's gone on in every totalitarian dictatorship prior to the slaughter of tens of millions of people and the death of a hokey, phony financial system. Is V on with us now?
He is, Steve, and ladies and gentlemen, if this is your first time hearing V, the Guerrilla Economist, This gentleman has a fantastic resume. He served as a top analyst and commercial banker for one of the United Kingdom's, UK's biggest financial houses. I'll tell you, I could check off his list, but if you go to HomelandSecurityUS.com, he's got his own little corner there under the guest section. All of his archived audios with Steve Quayle there as well. And he's got his own website, roguemoney.net. That's roguemoney.net. He's a contributor to stevequayle.com on the alert section. The Guerrilla Economist. Welcome, sir.
Hey, great to be back, guys. It's just an honor to be back here with you, Doug, and Steve and Joe. It's a very grave time, and one thing that people do not understand is, see, every time I come back and I do a show, I have to reiterate what I said, because oftentimes what I spoke about months ago comes to pass, and I have to bring that to remembrance to a lot of people. If people have been following what I've been saying over the course of almost 8, 9, 10 months or so, you know, one of the things that I've always warned about, and Steve warned about, and a lot of financial professionals who are awake and keen to what is going on, what they have warned about is, and I really want to focus in on this, is the capital controls that are going in place. I talked about that, and what have we seen 2 weeks ago when J.P. Morgan announced that there's not going to be any more international wire transfers. There's not going to be any more. The maximum amount of transactions you can do per month in terms of transactional activity is only $50,000, which is really nothing in the grand scheme of things for a small business owner. Okay. Now, that being said, you know, I also mentioned that other banks are going to follow suit, and guess what? Other banks are. HSBC is following suit, okay, in other parts of the world, like in Panama. They're doing bank holidays. ATMs are not working properly. My sources who are expats living down there are saying it's actually becoming a nightmare trying to get a hold of money because there's a crisis happening. And, folks, if you remember the first time I was on the Hagmann Hagmann show, I said before the dollar fails, you're going to see systemic problems in ancillary systems because you have different ancillary systems that support the dollar and or are beneficiaries or contributors of this whole dollar scheme. Panama just happens to be one of them. There's a vast amount of dollars that are laundered through Panama. That is a whole other subject that I'll get to later. The other thing that I warned about was when they were supposed to pull the rug from underneath us in October because of the September 23rd false flag event in Syria, which has backfired on them. And I told everybody that now they're going to backpedal. Now we're going to go into the slow burn. And now, folks, we are entering the slow burn. The first shot was fired not by a local bank, not by a small regional bank, but by the biggest bank in the U.S. in terms of overall holdings, J.P. Morgan, and they fired the first shot. And now I am hearing that Bank of America, PNC Bank, Fifth Third Bank, Wells Fargo, and Citigroup are going to be following suit very shortly. So what's going on here? Well, folks, let me tell you something. When you have currency controls, okay, those are the first signs that your currency is really in trouble. And you're seeing that they're going to prevent what's called capital flight. Oftentimes, the smart money recognizes what's befalling their nation, and they decide to save their wealth by moving their wealth out of the country. They're going to make that very hard and very impossible, especially with these international controls. And now, if you've been following what I've also been saying, I talked about FATCA, and that's the foreign tax system that they're setting up, where every single American who has a investment account abroad will have to report back to the IRS, and that institution has to report back to the IRS and rat on their American clientele and let the IRS know how much is this particular American holding in this particular amount, in this particular account. These are all things that are going into place because the powers that be understand what is happening. They're getting close to killing the currency. They're getting close to killing the dollar. You have what I'm going to get into later as well is Janet Yellen, who is Bernanke 2.0 with a dress, and what Janet Yellen, who's never held a real job in her life, who is nothing but an academician, okay, never really done any real work, real business, nothing. She is going to hyperinflate us into a level that we've never seen. We're going to see more printing of the money, and we are turning into a contained fishbowl where water is constantly poured in until we drown. And that's exactly what's happening. We're going to be drowning in currency because all the foreign holders of our debt are going to be sending those dollars right back home to us, and we're going to be drowning in it. Steve.
Well, I think it's so critical that people understand this, ladies and gentlemen, because what we're talking about is not only capital controls but people controls. The distinction of a fool and his money are soon separated is coming into view so, how should we say, definitively, and it's becoming so obvious that in essence, and I'm going to say something, so don't get mad at Doug or anybody else, get mad at me for this one, but for those of you who are Christians watching literally the vilification, ultimately for the destruction of the U.S. military if they hold their faith in Jesus Christ, if you think that you'll be able to exist in this realm that's coming and basically go to church on Sunday and sing, whatever new Kumbaya song they come to replace even the old Kumbaya with, the bottom line is you're lying to yourselves. When goods don't cross borders, armies do. Von Clausewitz, in his classic work on war, O-N-W-A-R. Clausewitz, in case you want to Google it, is C-L-A-U-S-E-W-I-T-C. What V has just told you, you go ahead and speak it. I'll make it as simple as I can make it. V, tell me if I don't do it right. You won't be able, you think it's just about moving your money out of the country? You will need permission to move your money inside the country. This thing is coming down. You've been told over and over, you're going to have your money taken from you in the bank. And I think I posted, Doug, you may have seen it in V, you probably saw it, but even some of the mainstream press now, forgive me, not the mainstream, but I would say as close as you can get the mainstream press are saying, especially Dave Hodges' latest article, if you still think that the banks are holding your money in safety, you're going to lose it all. Now, why is that? Because, ladies and gentlemen, before we are, how do I say this, given to the flames of history as a nation facing divine judgment, these buzzards, no better word can I come up with, I have been waiting for this day. What they needed was the correct set of circumstances to basically undermine and dissolve any dissension or any ability in their minds for anybody to stand up against them. V, I've been fighting with people over this for 20 years when we first started talking about the days when the infiltration of foreign troops brought into this country. I forget who said it, but the quote was something like this, spoken from a former KGB, I believe it was either the archivist or one of the defectors, that friends in the U.S. government would allow us to reposition and to position our troops, men and materials inside the country shortly before the takeover. Now, ladies and gentlemen, this is not pie-in-the-sky stuff. We could talk to you about advanced economic theory, but let's make it easy. When the EBT cards went down, you saw on forums, and I don't visit forums, but I got email clippings of people that know I don't visit forums talking about they're going to burn this MFing place down. They're going to riot. And today, Thomas Sowell, and forgive me, but he is a very, very brilliant, and he is a black man, said, he in the opening paragraph of his story, Coming Civil War, he said he's glad he's old enough not to have to live with what he sees coming. Now, when I said that on Coast to Coast almost 15 years ago maybe, and certainly 13 years ago, that we were going to be facing race war in this country, the host at that time, and I forget who it was either Art or George, 13 years ago, I don't remember, but I do remember them saying, well, I sure hope not, and you're kind of painting the worst-case scenario. And the idea that now it's a worst-case scenario, do you really think that someone's not stirring it up? Ladies and gentlemen, we are seeing the greatest division in this once great republic that has ever been experienced. The us versus them. I was sitting watching in a restaurant. I was watching a TV feed, and basically they were quoting Sibelius. Now there's a nutcase, but quoting Sibelius, she says, "I'm glad I don't have to answer to the people that are complaining." Well, let me just tell you, that's the middle finger salute to the American public. And ladies and gentlemen, what you've got now is you've got scoundrels, brigands, and thieves telegraphing to you what they're going to do, delighting in a perverse, almost, and there were, not mine, one guy, and I'll tell you who it was, Ted Turner said, power is better than sex. So an orgasmic display of glee at how stupid the American people are. What I'd like to think, instead of getting mad at V or me or saying, do we have to list that same old stuff again? Then don't listen. But you better understand that the antidote for ignorance is knowledge. If you do not want the antidote for ignorance, then the penalty for ignorance is destruction. Go ahead, V.
Well, if I can just interject something here, Steve, which you mentioned and you spoke to this. Currently I've got, and it's not an easy read, for those people who really want to understand the big picture here in terms of, what's going on. Carol Quigley, professor, wrote just a 1,330-page book called Tragedy and Hope. And, of course, Carol Quigley is was the mentor of Bill Clinton. And, of course, what we're seeing taking place today is the New World Order. Is the implementation of the New World Order. And the reason I mentioned this book, Tragedy and Hope, if you read this book, you can see the utter contempt the network of power the leaders have for us, as human beings and ordinary people, the middle class. We're treated en masse as helpless puppets on this international chessboard, where these giants of economic and political power, they're subjecting us to wars which we are not signed on to or we're not backing. Revolution, they're fomenting, and civil strife, they're fomenting revolution here in this country. Confiscation and subversion, indoctrination, manipulation, and outright deception. If that's what if it's their plan, and it does. But this is what Quigley had outlined with hubris, no less. So, folks, please pay attention to what V is saying, and even if you think, well, I've heard this before. Again, the further back you look, as one of the taglines to one of the movies is, further back you look, the further ahead you can see. And in this case, when you talk about money, this is important. So I just want to interject that because there is pressure from the top, there's pressure from the bottom, but the pressure from the top right now, their tactic is to create revolution, to create violence, and an extremely serious dislocation of the middle class, our wealth, our money, not the currency, but our money, and we are going to be left hungry, starved, and as Steve had given in the title, our bones are going to be picked clean. If you don't believe it, well, just wait and see. It's like the weather in most parts of the country. If you don't like it, wait 10 minutes, it'll change. Go ahead, B. Sorry about that.
Well, no problem, Doug. It's great points. If we all remember what Jamie Dimon spoke about last time when he was having that meeting over at the CFR. And, Doug, I think you remember that quote where he said the American people, and I'm paraphrasing over here, will need to deal with their debt, right?
Yep.
And they have to deal with it internally or externally, but either way they got to deal with it. And that's just basically saying that all the gambling debts of the banksters are going to be leveraged onto the shoulder of the American citizen. And it's no longer their debt, it's your debt. So in order for us to service our debt, what the banksters are going to do is they're going to start implementing austerity. And here's the thing why people need to pay very close attention to shows like this. Because, I'm trying to my best to let you know where we are right now and where we're headed and where we've come from. Okay, we're already seeing capital controls, which I've warned about. the same types of controls that were happening in the EU is going to happen here, but it's going to be much worse. Because why? Well, we just happen to be the reserve currency of the world, so the suffering is going to be double more than anything else. Okay. Now, what they're also doing, the same types of programs that the World Bank and the IMF have been running throughout the world in blackmailing countries, in stripping them of their resources, and putting them into absolute servitude with loans that can never be repaid. They're going to start running that program here, and under the auspices of international bankers and financiers, the order has been given to start the austerity program. Just like I've warned folks, the austerity is coming home to roost, and we're starting to see this now. The first drop in the bucket is the EBT, the food stamp program, SNAP, Supplemental Nutrition Assistance. Okay, that program. What do they announce they're going to do? Well, starting in November, they're going to cut $36 off per month, and for most families, $36 is a lot. That is half a week's groceries for most people, and this is how it rolls in. And then next, they're going to cut other types of welfare benefits. And soon enough, folks, the goal of these guys is to create enough chaos and discontent that the controllable lower class begins to get very unruly. And once they get unruly, their anger and their angst is going to be focused not on so much on the politicians. No. Their goal is to make sure that their anger and their angst of these lower class, these lower working class, and those who are dependent on the government, that these class of people will be focusing and targeting the middle class business owner. They're going to be focusing and targeting the person who's making $150,000 a year, thinking that person's rich, and that's who they're going to be going after. And this is the type of controlled chaos that they want. As this continues, there's going to be further austerity as they continue to print, as they continue to inflate the currency. You're going to see oil start going back up, okay? And oil is going to start rising, especially going into 2014, the spring. The springtime is going to be the earliest indication that something is severely wrong, as oil ticks and stays above $105 a barrel. And folks, that's going to put even a tighter squeeze, because you got to understand one thing: the rest of the third world spends about 50% on food and energy. Okay, so we're going to be in the same position where our income, half of our income, is going to be spent on food and energy. It's something that's going to be totally insurmountable. It's something that's going to make us dependent upon the government, and that's exactly where they want us. They're going to create more. So it's going to be a continued road of suffering up until they decide when they want to end this. So now, because they didn't get their quick crash that they wanted, they're going to make us pay for it. They're going to drag this whole process out and make it as difficult as possible, okay? And the craziest thing is, folks, as we begin to see all these capital controls coming in, okay, what's happening with the stock market? It's going up and up and up. S&P is setting new records. The NASDAQ is tracking well. And none of this makes any sort of sense. Google is over $1,000 a share. It's in a bubble. Okay, if people cannot figure that out, I don't know what to tell them. It's in a bubble. So these are the things that are happening. And as things begin to unravel and as the pressure comes full force, it's going to create such a chaos, and that chaos is going to set in rapidly within the markets. Steve or Doug?
Wow. Doesn't sound good, Steve.
Well, here's the thing. Hey, this is something that, Doug, I've tried, and I'll try again tonight, and I pray that people get it. The new world order must arise out of the ashes of the phoenix. In the United States case, that's all of our culture, all of our history. Obviously, they don't want anything to do with the God that our forefathers did believe in. And I, for one, believe that George Washington did have the vision he had at Valley Forge. I do not believe that every single one of the founding fathers was some kind of a Masonic plant. Now, here's the thing. God sets up the basis of men over nations, but he also gives, there are cases in the scripture where more favor has been shown by an unbeliever to the believer than believers claiming to be believers. So order out of chaos. The idea that everything that we've known, that we've trusted, that we've been trained to believe, they're doing their best to destroy it all, okay? There's a couple charts I put up. I don't know if you saw them, Doug, but just showing how we compare to the rest of the world. And my comment was just simply this. Modern education, and I don't want to hear any of you who are teachers telling me I'm wrong. The thing speaks for itself. We are such pathetic representations. I think we're 21st or 22nd when it comes to our math skills, our language skills, and our problem-solving skills. Did you guys see those charts that I put up today, V or Doug?
Yeah, I did, as a matter of fact, Steve. And that's
and to paint a picture for everybody, let's just tell them this. You can go to my website, and I'll try and count how many stories. Excuse me. But if you look at those specific charts, you will see exactly what we're talking about. So what have they given kids in America? Drugs, video games, free sex, but more important, an altered universe called virtual reality, where people no longer have to get out in the marketplace or the workplace, because that was destroyed by the General Agreement on Trades and Tariff, the GATT, and NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Alliance. And by the way, Doug, I don't know anybody who screamed or complained louder than I did. And again, there was this great disconnect. Even Ross Perot was quoted. Most people remember this statement of Ross Perot's, that great sucking sound you hear is all the jobs fleeing the United States of America for foreign manufacturing companies. You remember that?
Yeah, absolutely.
If there's such a disconnect, and here's the thing that sometimes V and I talk about on off record. I say, V, how do we, you and I, in our prospective callings, in what God has shown us and what we're trying to do to answer those callings to help His people, how do we get over the willful, the chosen blindness that if I see nothing, I'm not responsible for it. If I hear nothing, I'm not responsible for it. In other words, the abject, and you're seeing this in the churches, by the way, the pulpits are what became rotten. You've heard the statement, the fish always rots from the head down. And unfortunately, there are no voices gnashing. Maybe Jack Van Impe's, I know, and look, I don't watch Christian TV, but one of my friends, Glenn, sends me stuff, and it sounds to me, based on what third parties are saying, this is a far cry from going on, a 50,000 megachurch, a 50,000 member megachurch, and saying that those practices expressly forbidden in the Scripture are now okay, and that a person who practices that which God calls an abomination can be filled with the Holy Spirit. I would say to that gentleman, Mr. Osteen, you had better be careful of blaspheming the Holy Ghost, because, again, blasphemy of the Holy Ghost is simply relating to the Scripture. When Jesus cast out demons, the Pharisees said he casts out demons by the very spirit of Beelzebub. That's when Jesus answered and said, all manner of what sin against the Father and the Son will be forgiven, but watch your step when it comes to blasphemy of the Holy Ghost. In other words, that attributing something whose root is evil to the Holy Ghost is the highest form, in my opinion, of the denigration of the gospel of Jesus Christ. It's like people say, well, he didn't really say this, or Jesus didn't really mean that. Well, Jesus absolutely means what he says what he means, and had the power. The problem is, Doug, Jesus was able to say, if you don't believe me for the words I speak, then at least believe me for the miracles I do. Well, the church has gone basically deaf and dumb, and I'm talking leadership now on a national level, and it doesn't matter what, Protestant, Catholic. What we're seeing is the beginning not only of civil war, but religious wars. And don't kid yourself. This is exactly what Hawk and myself and others have tried to tell people when it came to the Masonic plan to get the Masons, not the Masons, but to get the Muslims, to get the Christians and Jews to fight each other, kill each other off, and according to, obviously, the letter from Mazzini, then they get the pure doctrine of Lucifer. You and I, Doug, have both been experiencing a guy who claims to be a Christian and defending Albert Pike and trying to tell me, Albert Pike, there's something wrong with that, seducing spirits. And ladies and gentlemen, I don't know if any of you have ever been seduced, but for those of us who are honest and have, and I'm not just talking about sexual seduction, I'm talking about where we believe something with all of our heart because we've been told something, or we trusted someone with all of our heart only to be betrayed. Well, you know, the enticing words of men's wisdom stand in direct opposition to the gospel. And for all you PhDs with 8 different languages, and I would say this, what have you guys done with all of your trophy plaques on the walls and all your patting each other on the back? And if you wanted to, I can introduce you to a thermometer, and that thermometer is electronic. It can go up to 800 degrees, and it can go down to, 150 degrees below zero. So if you want to talk about degrees, then compare yourself to thermometers. Oh, wait a minute, but that's what Jesus did when he said, I would rather you be hot or cold, but because you're lukewarm, I'm going to spew you out of my mouth. So when we come on, Doug, with you, thank you very much, are talking about the next trends that are already playing out. Let me make it real simple, okay? It's like the movie Soylent Green. No one could figure it out until someone actually saw what Soylent Green is. When we talk capital controls, let me just say this. Let's even skip that word now because, it might be pressing. Let's go, taxing. Let's go to people controls. You won't be able to go where you think you can go. You won't be allowed to do what you thought you would be allowed to. Every single freedom is being stripped from you. And I, Doug, don't know how to say it any more carefully or more pointedly than that. Go ahead, V.
No, you said it perfectly, Steve. You said it perfectly. You know, people need to understand how critical things are. The Bank of Japan, one of their head directors, just announced that they are so critical right now. You see, Japan's never left the arena, folks. Their bonds are going their bond market. They're the second largest bond market in the world. Their bonds are going absolutely crazy. Okay, because there's so much of it being held by so many banks. A lot of the major banks are offloading it right now just to try to balance out the yen. The smaller regional banks and the local community banks are stuck with it because they don't have the capacity to offload this toxic Japanese bond. So every night, folks, Japan is on the verge of collapse, just like I said it was. And right now, it's to the point that one of the head directors of the Bank of Japan came out and said, you know what? We don't even need a stock market crash in order for this whole thing to go pop, in order for this whole thing to just come crashing down. That is significant when a bond market is so volatile that it can cause an absolute implosion without any sort of stock market crash occurring. That's significant, okay? That's how close to the precipice we are. France is announcing that they want currency wars. They want to engage. They want to devalue the euro. They want the euro to start, the European Central Bank to start printing and buying euro debt. And let's go. Let's get involved in this currency war. Let's get involved with the Americans and the suicide policy of the Japanese. Let's go ahead and let's copy these guys, okay? At the same time, the Bundesbank in Germany is saying, hey, there's nothing but real estate bubbles all over Germany, in Frankfurt, in Munich, in Cologne, and in Berlin. Bubbles in real estate. And guess what, folks? The same thing is happening in the Bank of England. They're announcing that they're doing nothing but they're saying, oh, look, the housing's not in a bubble. Meanwhile, every indicator is saying that there's another round of housing bubbles taking place. And, folks, you got to ask yourself why. And here's the reason why. The Fed has been buying and selling mortgage-backed securities for the last 2 years, and this is being collateralized and chopped up with all the other securities and assets throughout the world and being resold again. The same stunt that these guys pulled, but 10 times worse now, again in 2013, They're pumping the same garbage into the same markets, feeding it to the same characters and the same banks, and they're sold to you, the public, and you don't even know about it. So nothing's changed. Everything has gotten systemically worse, and that's what I want people to focus on. Just because, the market hasn't collapsed yet, don't be upset. It's an opportunity for you to buy. Just because gold is sitting at $1,200 an ounce, and you're sitting there, you're wondering, oh man, when's it going to go up? It's the most amazing thing. And me and Steve had this conversation maybe about 2 weeks or 3 weeks ago. We've moved more gold when gold was at $1,600, $1,700, $1,800, $1,900 an ounce. But all of a sudden, gold drops to $1,200 to $1,300. Nobody's buying, and the problem is the only ones that are buying are the Japanese, the Chinese. I'm sorry, not the Chinese, the Indians, the Russians, the rest of the world that are savvy to this. Okay, now the average American investor, we have an inside joke. Okay, when I was in banking, we had an inside joke amongst me and all the traders. The average American buys low and sells high. It's the weirdest thing, folks. It's the weirdest thing. The average American, he begins his trades. He wants his trades to go in early in the morning. The professional waits at least 2 hours before the markets close. And this is the same problem. I've gotten so many emails from people saying, "Oh, V, what do I do? I'm a little worried about my metals." And I'm telling people right now, hold tight, hold fast, because all the major indicators right now are showing that financially we are going into hyperspace. We're going into what, if anybody's seen the movie Spaceballs, that movie, there's a speed that one of the characters puts one of their spaceships in. It's called ludicrous speed. And folks, we're at ludicrous speed right now. And the markets don't make any sense. The printing is going hyperbolic. And we're right now in the most dangerous point, because we have this incredible inflation of prices with an incredible stagnation of jobs and employment. There isn't any. So what do you have when these two trends converge? You have stagflation. Another thing I want folks to remember, this whole charade of a government shutdown, and I said there's two things that benefited. Okay, number one, it allowed the bond market to regroup some strength, because you had panicky investors that were in real estate, riding another real estate bubble, because after all, folks, it's just business as usual, and then all of a sudden they're jumping back into the bond market, okay, which brought the bond rate down, stabilized the bond market for a little bit, all a ruse. The second thing that the government shutdown did is that all the financial reports from the Bureau of Labor and Statistics, all those reports that were supposed to come out every Friday, all of a sudden got delayed because it was a government shutdown. So during that time, you better believe there was some insider trading going on. During that time, there were some key positionings of certain equities that occurred that allowed certain individuals and certain corporations to profit handsomely. Is it a wonder during the whole BLS thing that certain companies are all of a sudden you see a rise in their stock prices? Is it a wonder that now, which typically occurs where a trader gets the BLS report on Friday and he's panicking because it's another sour report, and he's wondering what to do because the Asian markets are closed, the European markets are closed, and he's got to sit here on a Friday night, have his books closed, getting ready for a chaotic Monday. Now, those reports are coming in on Tuesday, which kind of stabilizes the market a little bit. Again, allowing a false sense of stability in order to pilfer more wealth and more money from the market and from the individual. That's where we are. Things have gotten more crazier. Things have gotten more chaotic, and people need to recognize that. Stop listening to the CNBC fools. Stop going on the Bloomberg radio shows and listening to that nonsense, and you need to start looking at hard numbers, hard facts, and that's what people need to do.
V, let me ask a question, because I've been following the different commentaries by the people in the know, supposedly.
Yes.
You mentioned stagflation and also hyperinflation. I've suddenly seen people coming on these boards talking about deflation as a potential ramification from our policies. Any comment on that?
No, the deflation is not even possible. Okay, the deflation crowd says, well, because we own the printing press, and as long as the printing press is printing and keeps inflation low at 2%, then we got nothing to worry about. In fact, I wrote a wonderful article on roguemoney.net called Hyperbolic Hyperinflation, and I detail some very intricately the differences between deflation and hyperinflation, and how a country like ours is more likely to hyperinflate than deflate. Okay, because of the simple fact that we're a world reserve currency, there's so much of our junk toxic asset that has been over-leveraged 40 times, floating around in every exchange in the world, clogging up books, clogging up markets, clogging up exchanges, and people don't want it no more. So when the dump happens on a world reserve currency such as ours, it's not going to be deflation. It's going to be hyperinflation, because we no longer have the type of we don't even have the there's no jobs. There's nothing. So so when we have a loss in currency and then there's no jobs, you have stagflation with high levels of prices because there's so much currency in print. So the deflation theory doesn't hold water, and I urge people. We celebrated our first month as a website on roguemoney.net, and I want to thank everybody for their love, their support for us. And as we continue to grow and develop, and I'm getting new staff on board, I'm trying to get some new writers, some real top-level guys who are going to start writing. And you got to check out that article. It's called Hyperbolic Hyperinflation, and I'll show you charts and graphs and all sorts of technical data that shows you the difference. But there's no way we're going to have deflation. That's a myth, and that's a Keynesian lie. And because what we're really heading for is hyperinflation, and the Keynesians would love a deflation. It's fine. We'll figure it out. But no, this is dangerous. This is the worst of both worlds, and this is something that we're going to enter into, and we're already in the process of entering into. Because look, the real inflation rate, let's be honest, it's not 2%. It's 9%. It's between 8.7 and 9%. So it's already here. And these banksters and these politicians and bureaucrats don't know what inflation is. But I tell you right now, the average American family who's struggling to pay their rent and pay their bills, when they go grocery shopping and when they got to put gas in their car, they taste the sting of inflation.
Absolutely. Steve, I went to the grocery store, I don't know, over the weekend, and I had sticker shock for like the following 8 hours. It's just incredible. They're trying to starve the families. I really believe that. Outprice the families, Steve, and you talked about this before, so it shouldn't come as any surprise.
Well, it doesn't, and I know this sounds jaded. I don't mean it to. But look, one of the things I did years ago, Doug, when I wrote my very first book, which was actually kind of a survival catalog book, and I forget what the name of it was in those days, Nuclear Survival something catalog. I got a copy, and it's like 30 years old. But here's the deal. In 1985, and this is important for everyone to understand, one of the most outspoken and highest-ranking defectors was interviewed by G. Edward Griffin. He's the author of The Creature from Jekyll Hyde and about the Fed. And he basically had this to say, and this is a transcript, okay, about how the United States would be subverted. Now, I'm going to say something. This has nothing to do with socialism. This is not Leninism. This is a complete Luciferian, i.e. /communist takeover of the United States. Now, I'm going to read this, Doug, through the next couple hours in parts because it's that important. He talks about the demoralization process in the United States is basically completed already. Now, that was almost 28 years ago. But here's what he said.
For the last 25 years, it's overfulfilled because the demoralization now reaches areas where previously not even Comrade Andropov, and that's Yuri Andropov, the head of the KGB when he was alive, and all his experts would even dream of such tremendous success. Most of it is done by Americans to lack of moral standards. As I mentioned before, exposure to true information does not matter anymore. That's what V and I talk about all the time. Doug, that's what you and I talk about. A person who is demoralized is unable to assess true information. The facts tell him nothing. Even if I shower him with information, with authentic proof, with documents, with pictures, even if I take him by force to the Soviet Union and show him concentration camps, or in this case, obviously FEMA camps, he will refuse to believe it until he is going to receive a kick in his fat bottom. When the military boot crashes, then he will understand, but not before that. That's the tragic of the situation of demoralization. Now, here's where I'm concerned. The next stage is destabilization. This time, the subverter does not care about your ideas or the patterns of your consumption. Whether you eat junk food and get fat and flabby doesn't matter. By the way, he was concerned with that 28 years ago. This time, and it takes only 2 to 5 years to destabilize a nation. Think of when the entity in the White House got in. What matters is essentials. Economy. Look at where our economy is. Foreign relations, look at where our foreign relations are. We're a laughingstock. 35 nations are furious at us because, gee, we're bugging their phone calls. Do they really think we wouldn't do that? Then defense systems, where you've got the complete transfer of Western technology to the Far East. And I'm adding that. And you can see quite clearly that in some areas, in such sensitive areas of defense and economy, the influence of Marxist-Leninist ideas in the United States is absolutely fantastic. I could never believe it 14 years ago when I landed in this part of the world that the process will go that fast. Those last, and he's talking in 1985, what God has given us, in my opinion, is 28 years of mercy. He's given us space to repent, as even Jesus gives Jezebel space to repent, but she wouldn't have it. And the next stage of the course is crisis, and that's what V and I are telling you about. This is a phenomenal economic crisis. It goes beyond, well, gee, I still can get less than 0.25% in my bank account, or crap, my Google shares are up to $1,000 an ounce. If they are, sell them. Everybody should sell if they've got any of that, because you should take the profit and buy a place, and I'm assuming anybody who can buy Google stock is probably well off enough to do this. But listen to this. And here's and then I'll turn it right over to you, V. The next stage, of course, is crisis. It may take only up to 6 weeks to bring a country to the verge of crisis. You can see it in Central America now, and after crisis with a violent change of power structure and economy, you would have the so-called period of normalization. It may last indefinitely. Normalization is a cynical expression borrowed from Soviet propaganda. When the Soviet tanks moved into Czechoslovakia in 1968, Comrade Brezhnev said, now the situation is brotherly Czechoslovakia is normalized. This is what will happen in the United States if you allow the schmucks to bring the country to crisis. Guess what? The schmucks are bringing us to crisis to promise people all kinds of goodies in the paradise once everything is on earth to destabilize your economy, to eliminate the principle of free market competition, to put big brother government in Washington, D.C., with benevolent dictators like, and he quotes Walter Mondale, who will promise lots of things, never mind whether the promises are fulfilled or not. He will go to Moscow to kiss the bottoms of a new generation of Soviet assassins. Never mind, he will create false illusions that the situation is under control. The situation is not under control. The situation is disgustingly out of control. Most of the American politicians, media, and educational system trains another generation who think they are living in peacetime. False. The United States is in a state of war, undeclared total war against the basic principles and the foundations of the system. And the initiator of this war is not Comrade Andropov, of course. It's the system. However ridiculous it may sound, the world communist system or the world communist conspiracy. Whether it scares some people or not, I don't give a hoot. If you're not scared by now, nothing can scare you. And I'd add in that,
And if you don't care enough to do what we're trying to help you to do, then you're wasting your time listening to us. But you don't have to be paranoid about it. What actually happens now, that unlike myself, you have literally several years to live on unless the United States wakes up. The time bomb is ticking. Every second, the disaster is coming closer and closer. And unlike myself, you will have nowhere to defect to unless you want to live in Antarctica with penguins. This is it. This is the last country of freedom and possibility. Now, I'll say this. Now do you understand, ladies and gentlemen, why the U.S. military has been taken apart, sold off, and double-crossed? Now do you understand, ladies and gentlemen, why the American dollar was told to Kyle Bass 2 years ago by one of the administration mouthpieces that they're going to destroy the dollar? Now do you understand, ladies and gentlemen, why the God who blessed us, and we used to sing the national anthem, put our hands on our heart, we used to have a heart of gratitude. Now we've got a heart of graspitude. We're trying to grasp, that's a new word, by the way, graspitude. We're trying to understand how to grasp on to what's fleeing from us. And once, ladies and gentlemen, it's lost forever. And God help us all, because if you don't hear anything V has said up until this point, if you disregard everything I've ever told you up until this point, you better listen for the next couple hours, because we're laying it out. We're spelling it out. History will declare us to be whatever they'll declare us to be. That's if they don't just burn all the books. But I got news for you. I could care less. What I care about is your life. And when we pray for you, when we are on this radio program praying and beseeching God and interceding and judging by the response that Doug knows we get, there are a whole lot of people out there in need of a whole lot of help. And if it weren't for Jesus, I would shut up and I'd basically go, maybe not to Antarctica, but I'd probably go to Patagonia. Go ahead, V.
You know, one of the things I also want people to recognize is the fact that our banking system is so screwed up, and it's gotten much worse. I mean, the FDIC is, from one of my sources, is actually saying that there's over 1,500 local banks that are totally dangerous, is the word that they're using. Totally dangerous, meaning that these banks could go bust. You see, folks, unlike their big brothers in Wall Street that can get bailed out by Helicopter Ben and soon to be Janet Yellen, the smaller regional banks, they're all over leveraged, and guess what? Real estate. Okay, that's residential real estate as well as commercial real estate. And this toxicity, folks, is systemic. So the problems since 2008, and I don't want to beat a dead horse here, has gotten systematically worse. So I want you to think about that for a second, okay? Every person that has said, with an earshot of my voice, and you even thought about it in your head, oh, this is, it's a cycle. It's getting cyclically worse. You're right. It is a cycle. It's a cycle of an economic superpower coming to its end and a new one taking its place. That's what this cycle is. Every economic category, every economic real indicator has gotten progressively worse since last time. And it's to the point that it's so bad that the government has to constantly fudge the numbers. They constantly have to lie to you, to put you back to sleep, to let you know that everything's okay, that everything's fine, that there's nothing to see here, carry on. And most of you chuckle because you haven't been laid off yet. Your company hasn't downsized yet. Your state that you're living in hasn't been smashed yet. But it's coming. Because this cancer, folks, has spread through 52% of the patient's body. So when more than half of a person's body is infested by cancer, it doesn't matter how happy or how jolly that patient seems to be. It doesn't matter how much positive thinking he has, that this too is just a cycle and my cancer is going to go away. Even though 52% of my body's been destroyed by it, ravaged by it, you're going to die. And that's the point I want to make clear. See, you've been given, by the grace of God, you've been given a generous amount of time. You've been given some time to prepare. You've been given some time to get your financial houses in order. You've been given some time to make proper plans and proper arrangements because, folks, what we're going to see is the end of the dollar system. And that's my main thing that I want to help people with, is help them protect your wealth, help them protect their purchasing power, their posterity. These are the things that are important. And I'm telling anybody with an earshot of my voice, if you're in paper, you're just, thinking that somehow that these guys are going to fix it. They're not going to. Folks, if you remember, I said that as the system collapses, you're going to have the criminals come to a confessional. And months ago, back in July, we've had the Federal Reserve Advisory Committee admit, hey, you know what? We've been doing nothing but blowing bubbles. And that was soon followed by the head of the Bank of England saying, hey, you know what? We've blown bubbles. And the European Central Bank, Mario Draghi is going out and saying, we've done nothing but if people were to really take a look at the books in some of these banks, they wouldn't even invest. They'd be running scared. And now recently, you have more of these criminals coming out and admitting this. You have Jim Cramer, the man who will tell you to go buy a stock as the company's falling, like Bear Stearns, telling you to go out, hey, buy some Bear Stearns stock. It's good. Oh, these stocks are yelling buy, buy, buy. And people bought them and went bye-bye. We all know what happened to Bear Stearns. Jim Cramer, who was an establishment mouthpiece, the guy's out there right now saying, hey, the dollar's dead. You need to get out of it. Think about that. You need to seek something else but the dollar.
Interesting, V. We're at the top of the hour, folks. You're listening to the Hagmann and Hagmann Report on this special Thursday edition. It is the 24th day of October 2013, and how quickly things change in the last, 13 years. We've gone from 17 million on food stamps to 47 million, and of course, 1 out of every 5 households in the United States now is on food stamps. So we're right back after these messages. You're listening to Steve Quayle, stevequayle.com, and, of course, V, the Guerrilla Economist, roguemoney.net. We're right back. Give us 3 minutes.
Do not want us to speak.
For the first time in human history, for the first time in all of human history, almost all of mankind is politically awake. And these new and old major powers face still yet another novel reality, in some respects unprecedented. And it is that while the lethality of their power is greater than ever, their capacity to impose control over the politically awakened masses of the world is at a historical low. I once put it rather pungently, and I was flattered that the British Foreign Secretary repeated this, as follows. Namely, in earlier times, it was easier to control 1 million people. Literally, it was easier to control 1 million people than physically to kill 1 million people. Today, it is infinitely easier to kill 1 million people than to control 1 million people. It is easier to kill than to control.
Folks, I want to direct your attention to one of our sponsors, AmericanSurvivalWholesale.com. That's AmericanSurvivalWholesale.com. And tremendous as they are, they've made a package for you even more affordable. You've got to check them out, especially as we have time that's running out, running short. If you go to AmericanSurvivalWholesale.com on the internet, that's AmericanSurvivalWholesale.com, which is accessible via HomelandSecurityUS.com, you can see. Just click on the store link and navigate to their latest special. It's actually one of the new products here. Something that fits into your budget. It's Linden Farms 7-day emergency food pack. It's got a 20-year shelf life. Delicious meals. All you'd have to do is add water. It fits into just about any budget. Folks, the actual retail on this is well over $115. It's on sale right now for $90, less than $100. It comes out to about $1 per serving. There's 9 different meals to choose from, and of course calories. Folks, pay attention to calories when you buy these food. when you buy these foods. Calories, 2,000 calories a day for 1 week for one person. It comes in a 3.7-gallon rugged and stackable, easy-to-store container. It's a great buy. I would urge you to check that out, as well as the sale on 5-year emergency drinking water pouches. It's 40 cents each, $10 for 25 pouches. You can't beat it. That's AmericanSurvivalWholesale.com. And, of course, if you have any questions, you can always email them at their website. That's AmericanSurvivalWholesale.com. Tell them Doug and Joe sent you. Hi, folks. Doug Hagmann here. You might know me as the co-host from the Hagmann Hagmann Report, or as a frequent guest on Coast to Coast AM with George Norrie. If you're like me, you're tired and confused over today's headlines. You just don't know where to turn for accurate, concise information about really what's going on, what's truly going on in today's society. If you don't know where to turn for accurate, well-researched, and properly vetted news, I've got a suggestion. In fact, it's a requirement. Bookmark Canada Free Press. That's CanadaFreePress.com on the Internet. It's just not for Canada. It's for news across the world. Judy McLeod, founding editor, has put together a vast array of talented writers like Kelly O'Connell, Daniel Greenfield, Dr. Eileen Johnson-Powell, a lot of guest columnists, very talented writers. Folks, that's Canada Free Press at CanadaFreePress.com. Now mobile friendly. Follow on Facebook, because without America, there is no free world.
Doug Hagmann, one guy that doesn't need a bullhorn to get your attention.
You want answers. I want the truth. You can't handle the truth.
And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to hour number 2 of the Hagmann Hagmann Report on this Thursday, the 24th day of October, 2013. My two very special guests. By the way, I'm flying solo again tonight. Joe will be back tomorrow, that is, if he doesn't have just, another tooth pulled or whatever. But he should be back tomorrow with us. But we have two very special gentlemen on with us tonight. Of course, Steve Quayle from stevequayle.com. Folks, you've got to bookmark his site. Visit the alerts every day. Just keep an eye on what he posts. It's cutting-edge stuff. And, of course, the Guerrilla Economist at roguemoney.net, a contributor to stevequayle.com in the alerts section. Fantastic, knowledgeable man. And, of course, right when we took the break, I played a clip about from Zygmunt Brzezinski, more of a evil person I cannot think of, in my view, and that of course is me, not necessarily reflective of the opinions of my guests. But I've got to tell you this, talking about the essentially the mass extinction of people as they awaken right now, world humanity, I believe, because of programs where Steve and V contribute, like ours. People are beginning to awake. We are the source of latent power, and that terrifies these Luciferian demonic entities in power. And there's this constant fear that we might awaken and frustrate their gigantic schemes, plots, and plans, especially when they've acquired an education, like we've acquired the education and accumulated a little bit of property, which gives us a very significant degree of independence. And this is what's taking place right now. But we are now a threat to these demonic entities because of the fine men like Steve Quayle and V, the Guerrilla Economist. Welcome back, gentlemen. Thanks for joining us tonight. Appreciate it. Steve, I'll turn it over to you.
Who are you turning it over to, Doug?
No, I'll turn it over to you, Steve.
Okay, well, first of all, here's the thing, and there's so many things, it's kind of like, people want one thing. Let me explain it, and then V can tell you, and maybe we should go here first, V. Share with people how much of your background information, obviously you don't have to tell sources, but just tell the people from, let's say, maybe where they're positioned, not the name, but just tell people what they tell us going on. It's funny because when you said that HSBC was down, you got it from a guy who banks there in Panama. I got let's just say this, some Balaam's form of transportation emailing me saying, well, I don't bank there, I'm okay. The point is that, as Pastor Langford said, this is going to seek out everyone. And when Christians say to me, I don't understand how gold and silver will be used, let me explain something, and I'll turn it right over, V. That when the early Christian church had to flee for their life, everyone forgets that Jesus had a murder sentence of Herod against him. his mother and her husband, Joseph, took Jesus into Egypt. They lived on gold, frankincense, and myrrh, the three most valuable commodities, but they were fleeing for their life. When the early Christians converted, many of them slaves under Rome, they knew if they got caught, they'd be crucified, thrown in the lions or whatever, but they had to run for their lives. Jesus tells us when we see the abomination of desolation, literally declaring himself to be God. Well, we're seeing the forerunner of that right now. Head to the hills. There is no normalcy, and this is the thing. If I can do anything, Doug, by the grace of God, I pray that the ears of the people be open. It's not basically rocking chair watching television until Jesus comes. That's not what it's going to be like. We're going to be thrust into the worst times. And for all you saying, well, I'm out of here tomorrow, I'm out of here the next day, I'm out of here on the next moon, I'm out of here on the second moon, I'm out of here on the blood moon, I'm not making fun of that. All I'm saying is this. You should now start saying, Lord, if I have to stand, give me the grace to stand. If I'm going to need strength I don't possess the strength I need to stand. But like I think it was Corrie ten Boom said when her dad was ready to put her on the train, she and her sister, they get their tickets at the last moment while standing on the platform. Notice this, that was at the last moment. I don't understand why God comes through at 11 hours and 59 minutes. I don't. But I will say this, he does come through. So what we're telling you, and this is what I'm going to answer this question because I got it dozens of times this week. Gold and silver. Silver will be bartered, whatever the price of silver is on a worldwide basis. Somebody asked me this, and you'll appreciate this. Well, what happens if it's worth $300 around the rest of the world, but the government says the official change rate is only $50 an ounce? Well, the bottom line is that people are running from the government like you or going underground. See, this is what people don't get. The official price will be set worldwide. People know value in any barter-oriented society. Listen, the Federal Reserve did something which was so amazing. They got people to give up real stuff for promissory and illusory IOUs. And what V is trying to do is take the veil off that. Go ahead, V. I hope I've given you a correct introduction to how do we get it through? How do we get it through?
Well, the thing is, the problem is this. Okay, everybody, and this really is turning out to be a conversation between deflation and hyperinflation, and I'm gonna bury it right now, just so that the American understands this. Okay, the typical Keynesian, his line of demarcation in all financial understanding stems from what occurred in 1933. Okay, we are so systematically different from 1933 that the only way this thing ends is ending through hyperinflation. That's it, okay? And what I call it's a hybridized, we call stagflation, but I just want to talk about just the monetary aspect, not employment rates or anything like that, just the monetary aspect with the currency. People have a lackadaisical attitude, and I call it cultural insanity, okay? You can call it a normalcy bias. You can call it cognitive dissonance. I call it cultural insanity. Why? I can take a chart that shows a 98% destruction of the value of the dollar, hold it to the average American's face, and say, you see that? That's your dollar as it has lost 98% of its value in the last 100 years, being managed by a central bank whose job was to preserve its wealth and purchasing power. And if I tell them that that other 2% of value, you're about to lose that too, they just chuckle. They don't get it. There's a mental disconnect. What people don't understand is that hyperinflation is an absolute insidious economic killer. And if you study the history, and now folks, I've studied collapses in over 66 countries and have over close to 1,000 years of data at my disposal. And I will tell you, the thing about hyperinflation is that it is an absolute insidious, stealthy killer. It destroys your wealth, your retirement, your bank funds, and the value of your currency very rapidly and very quickly, simply because it springs on you. It surprises you. And most countries that fall into this, into hyperinflation, they never recognize the signs. And folks, we are in the signs of this whole thing. So the average American who sits there and says, oh, what's going on in Panama doesn't really affect me, of course it does affect you. Because all the banking networks are linked up. It's never been linked up the way it is now. So one systemic effect in a far-off country happens to affect you as well. It's all tied in. And the way that they're able to manage all this concussive blows that are happening is by controlling the monetary supply to absorb as many impacts through the normal operation of business. Now, that's being stretched thin because we're in a liquidity crisis. We're in a solvency crisis. There's the liquidity that was there before that allowed, like for instance, if this whole thing that happened in Panama or these things that are happening in Japan or in the Eurozone happened about 15 years ago, it would have been fine. It would have been contained. There would have been some time for a nation or the banking system to take the blows. Liquidity is like fat, okay? It's like a fat on a boxer or something like that. It cushions the blows, all right? Or it's like a padding on a football player. It's there to cushion some of the blows to some of this financial risks that are and these financial situations that are occurring. But once the liquidity is gone and once you have a solvency crisis like we have today, folks, what you're seeing is not a glitch. What you're seeing all over the world right now, it is banks that are in crisis. You're never going to see it. I have my contacts in Germany and the Eurozone. They're telling me, V, you will not believe it, okay? Deutsche Bank is acting like it's business as usual. Meanwhile, they are in a whole heap of trouble, okay? Absolutely whole heap of trouble. And in much of the Eurozone, they're already putting out reports. Jacques Brand, the CEO of Deutsche Bank, he's saying everything's fine. My bank is okay. And the head of the Bundesbank is coming forward and saying to the German public and all these economists, everything's fine. We're heading for record growth next year, record growth in the Eurozone. Folks, they're not even talking about what's happening economically. And if you notice, it's the same playbook. It's the same page from the same playbook that's being used over here. Nobody's talking about the solvency crisis. Nobody's talking about the fact that there's no lending. Nobody's talking about the fact that there's 34 million homes in shadow inventory, that real estate's an absolute mess. Stock market is so overvalued that there's no more true market pricing. No one's talking about that. All they're talking about right now is this distraction with a stupid healthcare website that doesn't even work.
That was an intentional pause there. Consider what he just said too. It's a distraction here, and no one is looking at the solvency crisis, liquidity crisis. Steve, comments on that?
Well, let me share this. I think even beyond liquidity crisis, let's just call it really blunt and kind of an acronym, and this will make my critics go nuts. We've got a stuff crisis, okay? We've got a group of individuals that control the world, and Jesus said the love of money is the root of all evil. Therefore, the control of money is the control of all evil. Not money being evil, but the control and the love of it. Actually, that word is lust for it. So the thing is, if you understand what I'm saying is this, I want everyone just to imagine, just come on, take this little, we'll call it a mental break from the Hagmann radio show tonight, and I want you to think that, okay, today's Thursday, tomorrow's Friday, because evidently the people who are on electronic benefit cards didn't get this through their heads, so I hope you get it. You go to sleep tonight, fill in the blank, whatever you have in the bank, whatever you're getting on a monthly check, no matter where the source is, just fill that in. And the tragedy of generating a country that is dependent on government largesse and their next paycheck is so overwhelming in your face. So I want to say this. Imagine this. How long could you make it if you didn't have those checks coming in? How long could you make it if everything you could go and touch in the bank was no longer available to you? Because people in Cyprus had to deal with that, just like the people on the electronic benefits card, they could not access it for how many hours, or in some cases, how many days. Yet now we're being told that they're going to be cut back, and then we're facing, $36 a week. That's $144 a month. And so that's a great deal of a food budget that a lot of people are going to have to cut back. And let me go one step further than everybody else. This is not about anything other than eugenics, Doug. I have fought for this principle for so many years on talk radio. I'm approaching another 2 years if the Lord would give it. Not that I'm necessarily looking forward to that, but a quarter of a century, half my life on talk radio, or let's say 40%. Yeah, 40% of my life on talk radio, and yet still unable to communicate that we are in the kingdom of a magician's madness. We are in a kingdom of deceit. We are in a kingdom of sleight of hand. We're all too busy watching what's on center stage to realize that not only have your pockets been picked, not only have your banks been picked, not only have your children's future been robbed, not only are the jobs gone, but you're facing the most amazing dilemma that you've ever come into. When the entertainment is over, you're left with absolute nothing. This is an issue of eugenics. This is an issue of 200 million Americans being put to the sword. I don't mean necessarily literally, but I mean their lives ending. This is the globalists. Fukushima, there's so much more to that story. And by the way, this morning when I was waking up, I think it was up at 3:30 or 4:30 when I started posting, the thing that I couldn't get away from was the visual image of a tidal wave coming to the west coast of America, not just because of the earthquake and, quote, seismic activity, but the amount of radiation and radioactive debris. I got the feeling that something's going to go very wrong, and it's going to get worse than we can even imagine. So, Doug, one of the things that people don't understand is we see all of the madness, not in the making, but in the implementation. We see all of the seismic events taking place. We see and hear of Comet Ison and Nibiru and Gabriel's Fist and Lucifer's Hammer and all the different names that it's gone by. We see strange electrical discharges going on in the universe. We see stranger weather. We see so many events happening, and they all basically boil down to drought and famine. And when you engineer drought and famine, ladies and gentlemen, you control how many people live and die. And as one famous prince from Britain said, if he could reincarnate as anything, he'd want to come back as a killer virus. I believe that was Prince Philip. So if I post 100, 200, 300 quotes, see, I'm right where Bezmenov was back in 1985. How many quotes does it take to get people to act? So when it comes to their financial future, it's like trying to argue with someone who's a pacifist if they have the biblical right to defend their families against someone trying to take their life. My answer is unequivocally yes. If that were not the case by logic, then God could not hold us responsible for suicide, because there are too many cases where if you did not fight back, you would have, by your lack of action or your inaction, capitulated to those who are trying to take your life. And again, I got to say this. That's the title of the Sheriff of Slaughterham, okay? You didn't think we'd mix that one. We are seen in their eyes everything from zombies to hogs to be basically butchered. And if I use Soylent Green, go type in Soylent Green in YouTube and watch the trailer, ladies and gentlemen, because if you've never seen the movie, I don't think there's anything raucous in it or raunchy, but just some of when the statement is Soylent Green as people is made and the lights go on, it's like too late. What V and I are telling you is this, is that we're trying to give you flashlights, LED lights. We're trying to give you searchlights. We're trying to give you everything that our collective colleagues, our contacts, our anointings, our callings are telling for us. And by the way, I get a kick out of, again, people saying, well, so-and-so says this. It doesn't matter what so-and-so says anymore, and that goes for me and V. What you have to find out is if we have been accurate and telling you what's going on ahead of time,
then if you don't get what's going on now in real time, does it, and this is my rhetorical question with 31 or 99 question mark, does it do any good to take you further? And that's what everybody does. Doug, when you bring on guests, when you and Joe interview this guy, that guy, me, whoever, V, whoever, what we're trying to do is give people the maximum amount of data and perspective, and praying that if you have 100 guys on, or let's say 100 guests, they'll at least connect with one person. Now, by the grace of God, we're connecting with people all over the world, because there are Christians that wouldn't darken a church, and I'm with them. I don't want to go into a vomit factory. I'm going to go hang out with Jesus. I'm going to find where Jesus is. I'm going to find where the moving of the Holy Ghost, and guess what? It's between Genesis and Revelation. It's in the pages. It's calling out to God, saying, God, if you're real, reveal yourself to me. Because, see, again, I hear it in such dumb-ass political rhetoric, and that's a biblical term. And if you're offended by that, ladies and gentlemen, please never listen to me again. You will be doing us both a favor. If you are so offended by a biblical term of a stupid donkey that actually was smarter than the prophet on him, then what do you hope to gain by listening to this? If you're in the process of continually criticizing, denigrating, absolutely attacking, why do you listen? And I think Romy gave a good answer. It's because the Holy Spirit is giving him one last chance, Doug, one last chance, V, to say yes to Jesus. Because I can tell you this, that no time will I go on talk radio from this point forward, I said it maybe 6 months ago, and not share my heart as if it's the last time I ever get to share. Because if an EMP attack happens, guess what? No more Steve, no more V, no more Doug Hagmann. They take down the internet, same thing, none of us. And it's going to become more selective in who they shut down. So, ladies and gentlemen, Jesus said, work while it's yet day, for the night comes when no man can work. You better decide to act. Please, one more time. If you are not persuaded in your own heart, then it's silly to call me and ask me the question, should I take my IRA out or my KEO out? Again, V, got about a half a dozen of those this week. If you can't take them out without quitting, then you should at least see if you can borrow against it. But the point being is that if you don't own it, you don't. If you can't touch it, you don't own it. And if it's not in your pocket, I think Gerald Celente just said you can't control it. If someone else controls your money, they control you. If you don't get it, that by keeping money in a passbook savings or getting 0.5% because you put in $250,000, that is such fatefully pathetic stewardship that there are no words I can even incorporate into my language without having to go and wash my own mouth out with soap and then trust the Holy Ghost to cleanse my heart. Because I don't know how to communicate, Doug, because as Bezmanoff said, it doesn't matter how many charts, it doesn't matter how many graphs, it doesn't matter how many quotes, doesn't matter. The only thing that will matter at the end of the day is when there is no money and you got a piece of silver, gold, whatever, and you can go, or you already have the food. Again, I'm telling everybody, by the way, it has so come home to me. Again, I guess it's the Lord reminding me that the food is going to be controlled. That's how they will manipulate you into the camps. Somebody says, well, it's not such a bad place to get a cot and three MREs a day. Well, that's better than most people are eating right now across the country. And when I say that, who are on EBT cards. So please understand, it is the lateness hour. We're facing GridX on the 13th and 14th. And again, there is such a disconnect, and I don't know how to reconnect. And I guess with this, with men, it's impossible. With God, all things are possible. So I no longer look to anyone except God, intercessory prayer, and the Holy Spirit to make the truth of what we're trying to tell you. Because again, I deal with it day in, day out, and it actually does begin to wear when we've answered this question 100 times. So go ahead, B.
One of the things that people have to realize, and I kind of mentioned this the last time when I was talking about the whole hyperinflation thing and started to harp on that, but people really need to understand this. And I also mentioned that chart. You take a typical chart showing the destruction of the value of the purchasing power of the dollar. It's gone by 98%. And you tell the average person on the street, hey, that other 2%, you're about to lose it. It's like painting a picture of a polar bear in a blizzard. They just don't see it. They just don't get it. They cannot fathom it. And one of the things you got to understand, folks, last month, again, I've given you warnings. I've quoted people who are top inside sources, people who have their hands involved in this criminality, coming forward and confessing what's being done. And the last month, what I had with the Fed released a chart showing the money supply, showing the base of the U.S. dollar, and its overall range in terms of a financial recession and what we're going through. Now, this chart, this graph, another graph, in finance, that's all you have are graphs and charts. This chart is pretty interesting because traditionally and every single time before, this was a graph that was always printed using decades as lines of demarcation. And over the decades, you would see the money supply contract, you'd see the inflation rate, and it's played out very nicely, okay? Recently, in the last release of the same old chart, the Fed did something. They changed something. To the average person on the street and to the average trader, he doesn't get it. But to those who are keen to these things, such as myself, I saw the alarm bells right away. And that is this. That chart no longer reads in decades. It reads in years. Now, you might say to yourself, well, V, what's the big deal about that? Well, when you read something in years, you're starting to stretch out the line a little bit. You're not seeing those massive spikes, especially in inflation. So basically what I'm telling you is that the Fed knows that their money policy of printing to oblivion does not work. They know that. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure this out. They know it. So they're trying their best to hide the inflation, is what I'm telling you. Okay, folks, when you have a process, okay, like printing money or quantitative easing, that's what we call an exponential function. Okay, and now one thing you got to understand: of every single exponential function that's created by a monetary system ends in either implosion or explosion. Those are your only two choices. Okay, so when you take the fact that there's so much printing going on, 98% of your purchasing power is decimated. Think about it. 10 years ago, the average price of a brand new car was what? $15,000, $16,000, $20,000. Now it's $31,000. So your purchasing power is gone. And we're in a very, very, very dangerous predicament like we've never, ever been before. And that's cultural insanity. Is that mental disconnect. And folks, and Steve, Doug, you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, and Joe as well. The only animal, the only example I see of cultural insanity in the animal kingdom is lemmings. All right? They follow each other with a herd mentality right off a cliff. And that's what the American public is. It's a herd mentality.
Exactly.
And they think that somehow they're going to be fine. It's look, folks, you got to understand. I'm giving you charts. I mean, if you're a member of my website, you can see these charts for yourself and look at it. Take 20 minutes. Look at a chart. That's what I do. I look at a chart for 10, 15 minutes sometimes. I know it's crazy, but it speaks volumes because there's truth in there. Okay? There's truth in certain charts. And you got to know how to squeeze it out. So when I'm giving you charts and statistics and figures, I'm telling you 52% of your countrymen are screwed. I'm telling you that the Fed is hiding the inflation, that we're heading towards hyperinflation. Here's the facts. Here's the data. Here's the numbers. And you're still not registering in your brain. Folks, let me tell you something. What's the first job of brainwashing? What's the intent of brainwashing? To make the brain not work. That's the first thing, right? And that's what we're facing here. That's what I'm facing. Most Americans are brain dead. They're brainwashed because there's no other I mean, this is the most unequivocal evidence of total and complete endemic brainwashing. And it's done because you got these corporate media talking heads, and just for kicks and giggles, an establishment guy like Jim Cramer comes out and screams at you and tells you to get out of the dollar, and you're still sitting around waiting for a stock market rally. It's beyond me. That's how low they think of you, that they could send one of their superstars to you and tell you to your face that your currency is doomed, and you still do nothing. You don't listen when I'm talking to you. You don't listen when Steve's talking to you. You don't listen when Peter Schiff or Gerald Celente is talking to you, or any of these bright guys that are out there, that Jim Willey, these guys that are out there on the front lines are talking to you, Eric Sprott. Even when one of their own, even when one of their establishment crony mouthpieces are coming forward and telling you to flee the dollar, majority of Americans still don't get it. It's endemic brainwashing. It's cultural insanity. Okay? And look, like I said before, every single exponential function, quantitative easing, okay, buying back of mortgage-backed securities, stimulations, bailouts, TARP, all of these things near term ended in an implosion or an explosion. Okay? Now, a chart showing this, you got all the data, and you understand that the dollar, you look at all the facts, it has to implode. It has to explode to absolute worthlessness very soon. It has to. And when you got sentient, cognitive adults, they're not even able to comprehend a simple concept. It's so glaringly illustrated and staring you in the face. It's unequivocal in its clarity. It's total, I mean, it just defies rational explanation for me. You know, and what do we get, folks? What happened in the last few months? You got all this phony baloney junk of well, the U.S. is going to taper, or we're going to taper. And then what happens? Bernanke looks like an idiot in front of everybody, which he is. And now we have a new savior that's going to continue to fix the system. Janet Yellen, the new dove, who's going to replace the total claptrap that Bernanke was, the Federal Reserve. And the corporate media is swooning to her, telling you, the public, oh, she's wonderful, she's a brainiac, she's the most qualified Fed chair, and she has an elaborate stamp collection, and she knows what she's doing. And you're going to go follow this nonsense? A person who never held a real job in her life? A person whose very husband, an economic prize winner and the Nobel Prize winner, who hates the free market? This is the guy who's going to save you? I mean, it's a joke.
It's amazing. V, let me ask you something here, because one thing that I looked at earlier this week, and I saw this as a really huge red flag, and we talked about in fact, you talked about this earlier in the program. You talked about September 23rd, the chemical weapons attack in Syria, and of course, and I've always said that the United States, we're a captured operation, and we're actually the army for Saudi Arabia, and the entirety of the Arab Spring was a UK, France, United States operation plan well in advance. But with Syria, we've got 150,000 people, men, women, and children that are dead, and that's probably a conservative estimate. People don't really get that through their heads. 150,000. In a war that the United States, in our name, we pushed for to oust Assad, but at the agenda was that of Saudi Arabia. So here's my question. Here, just days ago, based on the meeting from last week, you saw Bandar, I think it was, the mouthpiece for the Saudis, come out and say, hey, America, in particular, hey, Barack Hussein Obama, we're a little bit ticked off at you for not following through on Syria, and even more so on Iran. And I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, man, there's got to be some blowback here, and they're going to make it personal for us here in the United States. Do you see the Saudis I don't know, choosing perhaps to start accepting other currencies for payment of oil as opposed to the petrodollar? Oh.
They're already doing it. They've been schmoozing up to the Russians and the Chinese, willing to sell them oil, circumventing the petrodollar system. They're already doing it, number one. Number two, the Saudis are not to be trusted. Okay, these guys, these desert rats are not to be trusted. That fat, pudgy-faced scumbag, Bandar, okay, this guy is a total crony. There's a lot of things that are involved in the back end with Saudi Arabia. They know, they themselves feel the heat of the dollar. They know the system's coming apart. They wanted, and here's the kicker, guys. Here's some great information for you. They wanted this whole Syria success, this whole Syria operation to be a success, and it didn't transpire because they were supposed to make hundreds of billions of dollars off that Syria pipeline deal, and now that's been put on the back burner, and it's not going to happen thanks to the Russians. Okay, it's just not going to happen. So here's the thing: this guy Bandar had the cojones to go to Putin and pretty much threaten Vladimir Putin that, hey, you know what? Your Winter Olympics in Sochi, Russia, those Chechen terrorist groups? Yeah, we control them. God forbid there's an attack over there. This guy's threatening Vladimir Putin. Okay, so I don't think Bandar has any sort of respect for the Lord of the Flies, Mr. Barry Obama over here. Okay, I don't think he has any sort of respect for him, and I think that there's a chance that they can threaten something over here and blame it on the Iranians or the Syrians, so they can somehow get the American public riled up to go to war. The point is this, folks. This whole Mideast conflict works in favor of the bankers. It works in favor of the petrochemical companies. It works in favor of the oil companies, and it works greatly in favor of the House of Saud. And that's the thing. So while they're trying to coerce America to do something about Syria, they're also most probably planning to do a false flag event over here to blame it on the Syrians or the Iranians. And at the same time, they're trying to do backdoor deals with the Chinese and the Russians, telling the Russians, that thing that that comment we made about terrorists and Sochi Winter Olympics, we're just joking about that. We can sell you some natural gas and we can sell you some oil. We can circumvent all these things to the Chinese, And they're trying to get some defense deals done with the Russians and stuff. Let me clarify that. The Russians don't need the Saudi oil. They don't. They got far more than Saudi Arabia. They're trying to do some defense deals. This is the kind of stuff that's happening with the Saudis. They're not to be trusted. They're playing both sides. That's the answer right there. They're playing both sides.
Okay. And Steve, in tandem with this is something I saw as well. This is pointed out to me. You know how we are, or the Syrians, they're getting rid of their chemical weapons, and of course that chemical weapons threat ostensibly is lessened now because of UN oversight, international oversight. Something I saw, in fact, I think you might have linked to it off of your website. It was this back page article on some obscure website, newspaper perhaps, about a biological threat emanating from Syria, emanating from potentially from the Assad regime or from the Al Qaeda rebels. I think it was written to perhaps say that the rebels might have this biological threat. I'm sorry. And I was speaking with a source who indicated that was kind of could be kind of a warning sign of something happening here on a biological scale to make it more personal for Americans to get involved over either in Syria, in Iran, or both. Any thoughts on that?
Well, yeah, let's face it. We have a total surveillance society. We have intercepts upon intercepts upon intercept, and then somebody intercepts all the triple intercepts. They know perfectly. If it happens, Doug, it will happen with the full knowledge and okay or approval of those who could stop it. One of my concerns was when I wrote my book, Breathe No Evil, and I don't even remember how many years ago, 15 years ago, you got a copy. What does the copyright say in it? You may have had a second or third printing of it, but the point being is that this stuff is basically readily available. For those of you that grew up in the 50s and 60s like me, you'll probably remember the Gilbert chemistry set. Well, with so much available now on the open market, and if you've got money, I've said this, I used to talk to these guys that would sell anything, including their mothers, daughters, sisters, or grandmothers, for the right price after the breakup of the Soviet Union. There are so many variations of what I would call home-brewed biologicals and listen, if you got all these guys cooking meth, you really don't need that much more to come up with a very dangerous, I'm not going to talk about it, but what they can do with readily available chemicals. Now, obviously, our government recognized that and tried to, buy all the chemical supply houses so they could see if Joel or Abdul wants to buy, so much of this and so much of that. They're probably making either explosives or chemical weapons. The point is this. Chemical weapons are nowhere near as effective as biological weapons. The biological weapons development programs I have followed resulted in the death of over 100 and I believe 25 premier prominent scientists. So it's funny, Doug. Here's something, you'll really enjoy this. People don't know why I cataloged all the dead scientists or what the common denominator was. I thought I put it up. Maybe I didn't. Maybe when I transferred my website, something didn't get transferred. But here it is simply. Those who were involved in the brewing or in the production or the growing of some of the most deadly biological pathogens at some point were murdered. They were taken out. Doug, you and I were doing a radio show when we had Wiley go over the bridge, and you talked to the medical examiner, and that story still stands, in my opinion, as one of the prima facie indications that we were right on. And basically, when you start asking questions about that, he clammed up, where before those questions, he was very friendly to you. Is that not true?
That's exactly right. And yes. I went to a
why don't you share that with people? Because, yep.
Yeah, back in 2002, I went to a forensic class, and the medical examiner for Shelby County it was there. And, in fact, it was right after Wiley had taken his last swim, I believe, in the river. And he was the medical examiner of record, and I had this class was for the length of a week, and we had experiments together and had been classmates. And he was the medical examiner for Shelby County, Tennessee. And during the first part of the week, it was so hectic I didn't really get a chance to talk to him that much about very much. And I had asked him toward the latter part of the week about this case and one other case. The name escapes me, but it was she worked for the Department of Motor Vehicles in his county as well. She reportedly hit a tree. She was responsible for some wrongdoings with license identification, adult identification cards, and what have you, that linked to Dr. Wiley. Well, or at least within the same circle of influence. Well, he went from very nice guy, former Marine, big, strapping, burly guy. His name is Dr. O.C. Smith. Well, he went from being very pleasant to me. Then I asked the question, of course. His demeanor changed entirely. And it was 2 weeks after, almost to the day, 2 weeks after I last saw him, that he was found wrapped up in barbed wire with a bomb strapped to his chest at his office in Memphis, I believe it was, or Shelby County. Memphis. Authorities found him, and he was, like I said, tied up with barbed wire. He had barbed wire into his mouth. A bomb was duct taped to his chest, or strapped to his chest, and the end result was after, and by the way, folks, I just wanted to get this right, just so you know the significance of this. The results of his examination, his determination of the cause of death was not given yet, and of course, then they found him wrapped up in the barbed wire, and then a day or two after that, he ruled the death of that doctor as, I believe it was a suicide, instead of a homicide, or even leaving some room to be further explored as as still an open investigation. And so I hope people can understand. And again, this guy is the nicest man. Really, just a tremendously nice guy, and the integrity that he had and exhibited when I was with him personally, spent a week with him, was second to none. Well, after that, he ruled the death of this doctor as a suicide, and he, not only that, but he was charged by the Shelby County detectives, the very people he worked with, and the state police, of faking that event, faking a kidnapping. And they said he did this to himself, that he actually wrapped himself up in barbed wire and strapped the bomb to his chest. And by the way, when they put him on trial and they recreated that, they had to spend they attempted to recreate this 2 or 3 different times and spent hours upon hours trying to recreate this, how he could have done that to himself. So I guess what I'm saying to you is, the coercion is there, and this man now lost his reputation, lost everything he had to fight the charges, and the last I knew, he left the country.
So what that means in all this, ladies and gentlemen, is that somebody went to great extremes to prove that, quote, a suicide was not a homicide. Doug, if I remember right, I don't remember the color of the van, but there were people that swore, and they basically went quiet too, that they saw 2 men basically throwing somebody over the side of the bridge. There were alternate stories. And the thing is that what I'm trying to share with everyone is I don't think anybody, now they'll all steal it and say it's original. I saw it show up on Wrench and other places. Nobody did it before I did it. Why am I saying that? Because what gets lost in the translation is all of these individuals, whether they were Russian, whether they were Indonesian, Southeast Asian, American, it doesn't matter, European, they were all the top. These weren't flunky, like one guy said, he called me I can't say it, what he called me. These are just like run-of-the-mill microbiologists. I personally checked the bona fides of some of these people, and Wiley and Schwartz and others, these were the who's who in the world of recombinant genetics, molecular biology. So this wasn't, Ted and Bill's excellent adventure in the college microbiology room. These were the premier. So what I'm saying is specific development in bioweapons, and again, no one even talked about race-specific bioweapons, Doug, 15 years ago. Nobody did. And the deal is that because I did, they said, they don't exist, until a certain high-profile court case took place in South Africa with a guy by the name of Wutu Basan. And he basically went on record, and they let him off because basically he was sharing the beans on who was funding his investigation. He said this: you can initiate a biological pathogen or a viral pathogen, and you can aim it at whatever gene, trait, or characteristic that you can identify or that you want to target. In other words, you can kill anybody with blue eyes, brown eyes, blacks, especially because there's sickle cell anemia, even to the level of nutrients in their blood. So the point being, this stuff exists. So what I'm saying is this: the chemical weapons bad, i.e., when the Tokyo subway attack went off with the nerve gas and Aum Shinrikyo, what launched me in the radio world was, I said on a show, I think it was doing Norm Resnick, those of you who remember KHNC, or one of the talk radio shows, I said within 2 weeks there will be a chemical or a biological incident in one of the world's capitals, and from that point on, the entire world will change. well, I guess it was 2 weeks or whatever it was, almost to the day it happened. I didn't know it was Tokyo. I didn't know who was behind it, but I knew that it was going to take place. And I think maybe that was, again, the goodness of God trying to warn people. What we're doing tonight is the same thing. What we're trying to do is to show people the financial weapons of mass destruction, and I'll even make it easy. What you think is in the bank isn't in the bank. What you have is you live in the world of photons. You live in the world of computer-generated numbers, and if you can't touch it, you don't own it. Go ahead, V.
Yeah, excuse me 1 second. Yeah, that's a very important point, folks. It's oftentimes we still have this old school mentality of I open a bank account, I put my money into the account, and it's always going to be there. It's not. It's quickly given away in loans. That's fractional reserve lending. It's taken one step further. It's been collateralized as collateral for debt that the bankers or the bank would engage in. So that's number two. Number three, you're no longer a depositor, but you become a creditor, an unsecured creditor to the bank. So they have the right to. So if they actually lose everything that you have in there, you really can't do nothing about it. And of course, you might say to yourself, well, that's not a problem because the FDIC will come in and save me. Well, the problem is if you read the fine print, it says the FDIC will repay you anytime between 0 and 99 years. And here's another kicker for you: the FDIC is flat broke. So the option, the potential of you actually getting anything is nil. Okay. And that's the whole thing. I mean, one of the things I want to really highlight, and I was talking about, was the exponential functions. And the exponential functions of any type of monetary system, where you talk about money printing, stimulating buybacks, taper, all these things that we're engaging ourselves in these days. These functions, when they happen in the type of system that we have, and I want to make it very clear, folks. What we have is not a sound and sure financial system. What we have is a Ponzi scheme. And it is the inherent nature that when you have an exponential function and you apply that to a Ponzi scheme, that exponential function, let's call it, stimulating or quantitative easing or printing money, that's only going to accelerate. So what's the media saying now? What's the corporate media saying now that Yellen is going to be the new Fed chair? Well, simple. More money printing will fix it. Because the economy, because we didn't climb out of the hole we dug ourselves in, we just need to dig ourselves further and faster and maybe throw a couple of grenades in there while we're at it. And that will fix the problem. Folks, that's lunacy. It's insanity. But that is, in essence, what the corporate media is telling you, and the average American believes that nonsense. They believe that BS. They believe it. When the corporations are saying, and all these financial gurus like Paul Krugman, who I can't stand, by the way, is telling you in the face that the reason why we haven't crawled out of this recession, we're not in a recession, we're in a depression. The reason why we haven't crawled out is because we haven't printed enough money. And it was at one time that Krugman said, why don't we just mint a $1 trillion coin and pay off all the debt? This is the insanity. And this guy has a column on the New York Times, and they give him a Nobel Prize in economics. I mean, truly, I am living in the twilight zone. And so, as I was saying, when you have exponential functions and you apply it to a Ponzi scheme, what happens? We go hyperbolic. That function has to accelerate. Or, if it doesn't, it has to suffer immediate collapse. So all Ponzi schemes are represented by exponential functions of one facet of the scheme or another. And there's no surprises here. Okay, there's no surprises that the U.S., the entire U.S. economy, is a Ponzi scheme. And that's the whole thing. That's why there's no exit strategy for the Fed. That's why right now, folks, it's pedal to the metal. And the exit strategy is an implosion. The exit strategy is, they stop stimulating, this whole thing comes down. There's no exit strategy. The strategy right now is pedal to the metal, hyperinflate, and burn up the currency. And that's the whole thing. And it's insane. It's what I call a cultural insanity.
Wow. Well, V, we're at the. By the way, folks, we're at the top of the hour. V, when we come back, I want to just touch base with you and Steve about the vacuum that will be created when the dollar is killed off intentionally by these whack jobs, these psychopaths, sociopaths we have in power here, and who's going to step in? Because Steve, I believe that we're going to see a new Camelot, a new world order, the phoenix rising from the ashes, and I believe that that vacuum that will be filled will be coming from, well, someplace that we had declared our independence from earlier. Folks, you're listening to the Hagmann Hagmann Report on this, the 24th day of October 2013. Doug Hagmann flying solo till tomorrow. We'll be right back with our very special guest, Steve Quayle, and the Guerrilla Economist right after this. Stay with us. Welcome back, folks, to hour number 3 of the Hagmann and Hagmann Report on this Thursday edition. Doug Hagmann flying solo until tomorrow. Our special guest tonight, Steve Quayle, stevequayle.com, the Guerrilla Economist, roguemoney.net, and a contributor to stevequayle.com in the alerts section. And both fine gentlemen, they know exactly what they're talking about. But I'll tell you what, I think we can see what is coming. We know that there is an awakening, but certainly are we reaching everyone. You know, when Rome fell, was the world void of leadership? I don't think so. And I just want to draw your attention to Independence Day, the movie, that scene where the alien was behind, what was that, the glass cage or whatever, and the military man, I believe it was, walked up to the glass saying, "What do you want from us?" And the alien came and says, "We want you to die." And that's in my view, that is the agenda of these psychopathic rulers, and I'm sure Steve can. That's their perspective. That's the alien perspective, by the way, and Steve can certainly comment on that. But who's going to fill the vacuum when everything does implode, explode, fall, and the dollar is murdered? Steve, I'm going to turn it over to you, and then you can pass it however.
Well, I think what V and I are trying to say tonight specifically, and look, I don't know if the 13th and 14th GridX is a real exercise or not. I don't know the time. I know what they're announcing. I know the potential for false flag. I know as it becomes more precarious for the administration, Obamacare. How about this? Sebelius, quote, her direct quote was, "She doesn't work for those calling for her resignation." I cannot even formulate in my mouth a sanitary response to such arrogance, such belligerence, and such exclusivity. But how about this one, ladies and gentlemen? These told you months in advance what's coming down. And you want to hear something new? How about this? International Monetary Fund recommends stealing America's wealth now. By now, most Americans realize what they have earned, built, and own no longer belongs to them. It will be taken unlawfully in the blink of an eye. Much like Washington, global parasites now want more of your income and wealth. The international elitists are coming for your stuff. See, I use the word stuff. And many in our government, Democrat and Republicans, are entertaining closed-door schemes designed to once again relieve Americans of their property. On October 9, 2013, from its perch in Washington, D.C., and notice perch, that's a good word, Doug, buzzard perch, the International Monetary Fund released a report outlining its recommendations for immediate global wealth confiscation, specifically American wealth, and new capital controls and exit regulations. Now, can I say this? I'm going to turn it right over to you, V. It doesn't get any more in your face. Let's say the 13th and 14th is a real potential false flag event. Then, ladies and gentlemen, some of you would better move it. And again, I stay up late at night, sometimes into 2:30, 3:30, if somebody wants me to call them at night. But here's what I'm worried about. I'm worried about the money grab and the banks going down. And this is the greatest disconnect. And most guys who sell metals, I'm just one of them, don't they don't get this. The point is that you're dependent on the post office, FedEx, or UPS, or you're dependent on banks being able to accept wires and send wires. And, Doug, just like today, for instance, I have a policy. I want to ship now within 24 hours. I'm going to tell the people, I suggest you pay extra for silver. I ship gold overnight, okay? I ship platinum and palladium overnight, provided that, I get cleared funds. I have to wait for a check to clear. That means once the check clears. But the point that I'm really, really concerned with is this. Is like there is a clock ticking, and I don't know how long it's going to take, but I will say this. When the International Monetary Fund comes right out and says, we got to steal America's wealth now, I think V and I are basically will look at each other and go, man, maybe we weren't blunt enough, because this is what they're saying. See, so many times I see, and again, for all you armchair warriors that have never stood up once in your life for Jesus, never won one person to Jesus, all you do is hang out on boards and denigrate those of us who've been in the battle for 25 years saying, why do you give your critics so much due? I don't give my critics due. I deal with the thought processes of the critics, and I'm trying to share with you that most of you are paralyzed with fear. And, Doug, I prayed about this, and I've said this 10 years ago on talk radio. I asked, Lord, what keeps people, especially Christians, from believing that they can handle their own money under stewardship? And you know what he said? He said they don't want the responsibility to give account. Whoa, that took me by surprise, because I know this. I know in the parable of the talents that it was a effort to go out and to please the master. Yet some people won't even make the effort to make sure their families are out of harm's way. Now, look, I know there are people out there that can't do this. My number one bit of advice from this point forward to everyone listening is whatever you've got spare, get food. Get a way to stay away from everyone else panicking. We saw it in the making. We saw it already being talked about now. And if I were a communist, which I'm not, I would do exactly what these guys are doing in Washington. They want class warfare. They want race riots. They want greed and envy. And the Lord showed me, and I told this, I'm on record of saying this, and it was due to the work of another sister. She said, Steve, when I prayed, and this is what she said, not me, about all of the hateful things that are said about you, she said, you know what the Lord showed me? Jealousy and envy. And then I got, and I get this too, one night I'm praying about this stuff, and the Lord says, Steve, tell your listeners that jealousy and envy are the trap of the enemy, and if they fall into it, it will consume them. What caused Cain to slay Abel? It was jealousy and it was envy. What causes one person to put another person down? It's jealousy and envy. So, ladies and gentlemen, those are the right and left hand of the devil in which he's taking the symbols and smashing you upside the head. V, I'm turning it over to you. The bottom line is International Monetary Fund recommends stealing America's wealth now. How much more? Is there anything, and then answer that question if you would, and is there anything that would get the attention of people other than just having everything confiscated, and then they look in retrospect and say, gee, I wish I would have acted when I could?
I think the average American is so brain dead that he would literally bend over and take it, all right? He would not mind having his funds, 10, 20, 30% of his funds taken, because his government that he loves so much would tell him that this is your debt, it's your fault, and because we've had this extravagant American lifestyle, it's time for us to be responsible and pay the piper. And that's how the average Joe on the street would take it. All right, and it's insane. This is what I said earlier, and I've said it for months, for years. The policies that the IMF, and the World Bank has done around the world, in Latin America, and Central and South America, throughout Africa, those same strip mining policies is what I call them, are going to come home to roost. So when many of you saw what happened in Cyprus, some of you just laughed, oh, it's just Cyprus, all those poor suckers. You don't get it. Everything that these guys do sets a precedent. It sets a standard, okay? It's like it's like a feeding frenzy has begun. There's blood in the water, and the sharks are beginning to circle now, and now they're biting, okay? So this is a flood that has started and is not going to stop. And, folks, you're facing two things in America, and most of you don't even recognize it. And I'm trying to shout from the rooftops, we are facing capital controls. We are facing austerity. It has begun. Let the alarm bells ring. It has begun. It is austerity. What do you think Obamacare is? It's a tax. It's part of the austerity program. Do you get it? Do you wonder why your premiums are so high? What do you think inflation is? It's a hidden tax. Why do you think it's 9.7% and you don't see it? It's a hidden tax, all right? The fact that you can't wire money internationally and all these capital controls, austerity and capital controls work in collusion. They work together, and these are the hallmarks of a failed state, all right? Now, the earlier question, because we know we're doomed. If you don't get the idea into your head that we're doomed, financially speaking, that it's the end of America as an economic superpower, and I don't know what's going to happen, whether it's going to be a civil war or whatever may happen. That's my area of expertise. But I'm telling you, financially, it's a mathematical inevitability. And I'll say it again. It is 100,000% mathematical inevitability that we are heading for a massive financial failure, the likes of which the world has never seen. And the question now was, that was earlier posted by Doug, was, who replaces and steps into the vacuum? It's China. And here's the difference. China is not going to be so stupid as to have military bases in 132 different countries. China is not going to be stupid to do that, because every empire that has ever existed on Earth that overextends itself like that spends itself to decadence and eventually collapses. So that's not what they're trying to do. They're just trying to continue to be the economic power. How do I know that? Well, simple, folks. While we're building military bases and toppling governments and creating strife everywhere we go with our stupid, archaic, ancient, and failed gunboat policy, the Chinese are striking oil deals, mineral deals, real estate deals, strategic metal deals, everywhere the world over without firing a single shot. That's brilliance. Kind of thing that George Washington talked about. And I'm not sympathizing with the commie Chinese. I'm just saying, George Washington talked about do not seek alliances with any nations, but try to do business with all of them. And that's what the Chinese are doing. They're doing business. And that's where their key focus is, folks. And they've learned from us. They've been watching us the last 30, 40, 50 years. They've been watching us, and they've learned from us, and they've made better, I'd say, the way they're able to move and react. They react very quickly to a lot of their economic situations. So that's who's going to replace us, Doug.
You don't think, and I'm asking this from a longer-term perspective, you don't think that the City of London will have any oversight on this, on whatever replaces the dollar as a world reserve currency?
And there's that rift that between East and West.
Okay.
And it's going to be interesting to see how things play out. The City of London is an old powerhouse. It's from the old world. And the thing with the City of London, the Anglo-American banking structure or the Western banking structure has no credibility. And if you think banking laws in this country are insane, you ought to take a look at what's going on in the UK, because it's incredibly insane. I mean, over here we have rehypothecation up to 140%. In the UK, it's rehypothecation to infinity. So the UK financial house, one of the things that are happening amongst the British population is they're starting to realize, hey, we need to start doing, there's a great push to start British manufacturing. And you're seeing a resurgence in British manufacturing, a great deal of pride happening with manufacturing in Britain. You're seeing the resurgence with Jaguar, with Range Rover, I mean, heck, man. I mean, there's a lot of top-notch. I mean, I'm a car automotive aficionado. I mean, McLaren. There's so many things that are going on in England right now that are just they're producing some high-tech stuff because there's a reality over there that the politicians and the people recognize that we cannot be reliant on just the financial services. And over the course of hundreds of years, it's the financial services that has really propelled Britain. But now that's all that the chicanery and the con and the whole con job that the whole financial services industry in England is starting to be recognized and exposed for what it really is, that it needs to be quelled and brought under control. So the gist of what I'm saying is that even the City of London, just like Wall Street, has lost that illustrious reputation. They have the image of a scumbag or a sleazeball or a real sleazy used car dealer. So they're not trusted as they used to be. So it's going to be pretty interesting to see how these banking families are going to adjust to the capital or the wealth flight that's been happening in the East. Now, there's the elite Chinese families like the Li family in China, who are just as big as pretty much anyone in the West. Now, so it's going to be pretty interesting to see the power struggle over the reins of control. So, yeah, I guess it's going to be a wait-and-see policy. But currently at the moment, the City of London has lost a tremendous amount of credibility. Tremendous.
All right. And that's a fair statement, a fair assessment, I suspect, based on the current situation. But I remember, Steve, you and I speaking about the Illuminati and how this could shake out toward the end. And I think it was with a program or on a program with Tom Horn, perhaps. I don't know, Steve. It was the Illuminati end game would be the London would hold the would oversee the finances, Washington the power base, and of course. What was it for the religious? Was it Rome or something for the religious New World Order religion? But that said, certainly China. I guess we're looking at that as a reasonable alternative. But Steve, didn't we also? And I'll direct this question to you. At one point in the past, didn't we talk about a new currency already being at the ready? A new basket of currencies. Steve, did we talk about that?
Are you asking me, Doug? I'm sorry.
Yeah, Steve. Didn't we?
There was a time, when obviously the Amero was being readied, the combination Canada-Mexico U.S. currency, and then the information that was out there, even the photographs of it went up on my website. I don't know how many years ago. But it seems like what people don't understand, and B has alluded to this and actually spell it out, these guys have multiple fallback positions. It was China that even, I think, kind of put the kibosh on that, because what China got from us in technology and everything was the ability, quite candidly, to get a lot of technology in order for us to for the forgiveness of a bunch of our debt. And, again, the borrower is servant to the lender. So what's important that I think people need to understand right now is that it's kind of like somebody once said, if you owe the bank $1,000, they own you. You owe them $1 million, you own them. And what's happening now is that we're seeing it. Look, here's where the disconnect is. As long as you're not one of those 16 million Americans who's going to lose current coverage because of Obamacare, you see, it doesn't bother you because you still have a job, but, 70% of graduating seniors from college don't, that you think that somehow, this is what I'm trying to say, the myopic view of the world pretty much depends on your station in life. You can't tell someone who's spending the night in a homeless shelter that things are going to get really crappy. You can't tell someone who basically doesn't have anything to eat that things are going to get, hey, you better go out and buy some food. They have no money to buy food. So what I believe is our call in this day and age is that as
as we get led to go and help whoever we help, that it comes from us, meaning people who really do take the Word of God seriously. I put up today Matthew 25, and I think if I were everyone listening to this broadcast, I would go and read the Scripture of the Day on my website, because that always speaks to me, and it is incredibly important. You see, here's the thing. I can't help world poverty, but I'm trying to help the numbers not increase. Does that make sense? I'm trying to tell people that when you know what's going on, there's always an opportunity for you to be a blessing, and that person that you're being a blessing to can bless you back. But the problem is this sense of detachment, this sense of denial, this sense of in many cases, some people say, well, it's just hopeless and they're just waiting to die. That's not overcoming. And I think the next time David and I, Pastor Langford, do a show, it'll be on overcoming. But one thing you have to overcome, everybody, it doesn't matter whether you agree with me or not, you have to get involved. You have to come over to recognizing that these things that you say are only happening over there, they're not happening here. The plan is to bring the whole world down. The plan is to destroy 5.5 billion people. The plan is to generate a false World War III, a World War III that will be a false Armageddon, that's what I meant to say. And then out of the ashes rise the new world order. You can't go a day without listening to some veiled threat. Today, for instance, from Hillary Clinton, and reading between the lines of that, basically, if you want to prosper in the coming world, I'm paraphrasing, listen to us. Don't listen to them. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we be the them. They don't want you thinking. They don't want you questioning. They want you as automatons. And part of the tragedy is, Doug, is people are willingly giving up their uniqueness in creation to basically hope that they can become a Borg, or they can basically have enhanced capabilities, whatever. They can be their favorite comic book hero. And on it goes. And I'm telling you point blank, ladies and gentlemen, when the man appears on the scene with a big S on his chest, it's not going to be Clark Kent of the Daily Planet. It's going to be somebody who wants to subjugate the whole planet, and total obedience will be demanded. So what we're trying to say is this. We don't know the time. It's escalating. It's becoming more obvious. And I say this, Doug, rhetoric precedes action. If you start to question just how many people have been awakened, so to speak. I think the Guardian said 35 world leaders are being spied on. Let me make it easy for all you world leaders out there. Everybody is spied on. Everybody. The fact that they limited it to 35, are you kidding me? If they recorded, 124 billion phone calls in 1 month, do you think that because their foreign policy is so dependent upon knowing what everybody's doing? You see, this is what I said years ago when I said America will become a hissing sound in the nations of the world. We have gone from absolute respect to total contempt. And I'll stand by that statement. We have gone, as a nation, from absolute respect to total contempt. Amen. And that's the sad part. So, ladies and gentlemen, seriously, if you're interested, just give me a call, or don't give me a call because I don't answer my phone, or I'd be on 24/7 answering inane questions. But if you want to contact me concerning moving metals quickly or moving money into metals, send me an email. Give me the time you want me to call you, and I will call you. Doug, I just want to make 2 announcements, okay? On my website, I know of I'm not in Chicago, okay, so this really has nothing to do with me. I'm in Montana. But a couple of brothers who happen to have extensive law enforcement background, if you go on my website underneath the Val Canby bar, they're teaching a concealed carry class, self-defense, firearm class, and training. And one of my friend Rick's motto is, the more you train in peace, the less you bleed in war. So you can go on that link, West Suburban Concealed Carry, and, if you have to drive from any of the surrounding states, contact. These guys will give you a level of what I call practical field experience that sometimes just you don't get with your, normal classes. I've gone to Cooper's School. I've gone to a whole bunch of schools. But what's interesting is the guys in the field that stay alive by their skills can impart a whole lot. The other thing is tomorrow I'm going to be on with Daniel Holdings, at 4 o'clock. The link's on my time, and I'm going to be talking a lot about. Daniel has written some great books, and the thing that's interesting is he gets the veil that's thinning. So, ladies and gentlemen, go to my link, and we'll be on. Now, V, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you, sir.
Yeah, V, let me just throw some out there. I just want to tell the audience, you can look on our website. Daniel Holdings is a good friend of the program. He's been on our program, our show before. And Steve, I just want to reinforce that time, 4 o'clock tomorrow, your time, or what was that time tomorrow?
Yeah, 4 o'clock Mountain.
4 o'clock Mountain, 6 Eastern, the real time for V and I. For Daniel Holdings, or for Steve being on Daniel Holdings' program, don't miss that. Go ahead, V, I'm sorry.
I mean, what Steve said earlier is true. I mean, we're a joke to the world economically. Folks, the currency of a nation is the prestige of the nation. And if once your currency's gone, that's when you lose your prestige, not the other way around. America could get away with murder before because its currency was so valued, it was treasured, it was as quote-unquote good as gold. So it can go ahead and invade countries in Central America on behalf of fruit corporations, and people went ahead and had no problems. It can go ahead on various different excursions into the Middle East, and people didn't really say much about it because the currency was as good as gold. But as soon as we started enacting policies, and when the chickens began to come home to roost, and we began to pay the piper of the actions and the fruition of our actions, started to become reality, the prestige of our currency is now a laughingstock. It is a joke. And because of that, we are seeing a massive movement in the world that is already preparing itself for a post-dollar world. So the question that I want to ask the audience is this. If India, China, Russia, South America, Africa, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, if they're all ready and prepped, and all the other countries, and that's a part of the Asian tigers, they're all ready and prepped and getting their systems in place for a post-dollar world, what the heck are you doing? Do you think that you're smarter than some of these top economists in some of these countries who understand monetary policy, who understand that the dollar's not going to be around, that they need to seek alternative means? Do you really think that you should ignore such men? Do you really think that you should ignore such actions? Because this is reality. Now, I talked about exponential factors. We're heading for an inevitable worthlessness, a total Zimbabwe-like event occurring with the dollar. Okay, folks, and that's the reality of it. And unless you're positioned properly, you're not going to survive. So I tell a lot of people, if you need the help, contact me. Okay? You can contact me at guerrillaeconomist@gmail.com. You can go to my site, roguemoney.net. If you need metals quickly, you can go to stevequayle.com. You can contact him directly through his site and on his company, which is Renaissance Metals, which been around for over 35 years with excellent standing. I use him personally because I got sick of waiting around 2 weeks for my gold to get delivered. I get sick of, my client, when I'm trying to help a client and they've been using XYZ company and XYZ company is giving them the runaround, I can go to Renaissance and get everything done. So that's the issue, folks. You have to prepare yourself. And look, I don't want to beat a dead horse. Okay, but let me give you some economic realities. People will say, well, why come you only give out recommendations of precious metals right now? Well, here's the reality of it. The vast majority of you listening to my voice cannot do anything internationally. What do I mean by that is this. Abroad in the world, a lot of foreign investment firms do not want to take on Americans. This is the reality. Unless the American has some serious sizable assets, because of the laws and the pressure that is coming from Washington, D.C., that is requiring these financial institutions to report on Americans, it is causing an unnecessary expense and overhead for financial, not to mention a headache for these financial houses. So in lieu of this, they're simply saying, no, we don't want any more Americans. We've seen this in Switzerland, where some of the Swiss companies that I deal with, their requirements for minimum investments have skyrocketed. I've seen this in Southeast Asia with some of the banks and the companies I deal with over there. Their requirements have gone up, or they just don't want to deal with Americans. So what are your options? You got a couple $100,000 lying around. You got $1 million, $2 million. You got $5 million, $10 million lying around. Your best option for the short term and for the immediate long term is going to be precious metals. It is amazing that you can have all your wealth stored into such tiny little vessels that will preserve your purchasing power in the coming collapse. It is amazing the portability that gold and platinum offers, where you can literally take $3 million of this stuff and put it into a tiny little shoebox and be off. That is power. That's portability. You don't want to participate in the system. Some of you are angry with the economic system. Some of you don't like the system that's going on currently. What better way for you to operate outside the system than having gold, silver, and platinum, having these metals? Because having it allows you to operate outside of their controls. People ask me, well, what if they make gold and silver illegal? Let them try. Because all they will do is create a black market, which will drive the costs through the roof even more. And it's even terribly bad because it's a black market that they won't even benefit from. What do I mean by that? Well, look at the black market on illicit drugs. I promise you that the majority of the bank's liquidity comes from the drug trade. It was at one point up until 2008, when the cartels decided to pull some of their funds out, which caused a liquidity crisis, a solvency crisis, in a well-known U.S. bank called Wachovia, which was later absorbed by Wells Fargo. So this is the reality of it. They just can't. Anything they do to stymie and stifle gold is going to backfire. They can't stop it. It's been the store of wealth for 6,000 years. And every time the banksters decide to dump the price of gold, all right, it is a gift to the Chinese. The Chinese buy it up, and the Indians buy it up, and the Russians buy it up. Now, here's another thing, folks. In April 12th of 2013, 15 individuals, 15 banksters met with Barry Soetoro. And what was the outcome of that? Well, a couple hours later, we had the metals beatdown that occurred on April the 13th, okay, which was the pounding, which basically they dumped 400 tons of paper into the market. And this past August, you had a couple of individuals, again, some of the luminaries from the bankster world, meet with Barry. And what were they discussing? To confiscate your funds. Okay? To confiscate, to come after your bank account. That's what they were talking about. So how are you going to operate outside of this? How are you going to preserve your wealth? There's no other means, and I hope you understand that. I hope you break out of the brainwashing. I hope you break out of the programming, and I hope you understand what's going on, and it becomes very clear to you. Doug or Steve?
Well, I don't know how to say it anymore. And by the way, ladies and gentlemen, there comes a point where, where this is how should I say that, it has to set in. One of the greatest disconnects, and I've been dealing with it for 23 years, so if I sound jaded, I admit to being jaded, is where somehow everything that God created is being intervened, or forgive me, what's the word I want, Doug? It's being messed with. It's being modified. It's being destroyed, every barrier. Everything that was meant to protect us is being torn down so that everything that would come and destroy us is allowed to do it. But one of the things there's no pill for is stupidity. One of the things there's no pill for is laziness. And I got to say this, I can say, judging by I don't know. Right now, I'll just give you a count. I think on my email right now, I have 44,170 emails since, I'm not kidding, Doug, 44,170. And let me just scroll down here and see when that time was, okay, since May of 2013.
Well,
does that
Steve,
sound amazing?
I got 47,776 since February, so I don't know.
Okay, so we've got between us close to 92,000, and that's not counting the ones we've trashed, okay? It is humanly impossible for me to chit-chat, okay? Because obviously I don't have time. I just, if I send you my books for free, then please don't call me with 100 questions. Take it up with the Lord. I've tried to answer the 100 questions, but sometimes I can't. I guess this is what I'm trying to say. The most important commodity any of us have at this moment is time. And you can either redeem the time, you can blow the time, you can waste the time, you can, quote, kill time. And I tell people whenever you say, I got to go find something to kill time, I said, if you knew how little time you had, you would repent of those words. And I do say that, whether a person's a Christian or not, because we're about redeeming the time. Redeeming the time means you're buying it back from that which is fleeing away from you. In essence, doing what Joshua did when he commanded the sun to stand still. And sometimes we need to stand still and get the direction and guidance that we all need so desperately. Look, I have to seek the Lord daily for my daily bread. I have to trust God to help me in the areas where I have a shortcoming. Somebody said, one time I said, look, I know what shortcomings are. They're measured in millimeters. I said, the point being is that we've got to see how this thing plays out by our actions. There will be no spectators. I'll make another statement, and this one will, I think, maybe wake some people up. If you want to stay a spectator, you die. How does that sound, Doug? If you want to stay a spectator, you want to stay a spectator in the financial arena, just go, well, I think, or in my opinion, you're crazy. Well, everybody's got an opinion. But I guarantee you this, and at least I have the strength of my conviction to follow through on what I know to be historically right, economically right, and I would say this, here's the word, responsible. I'm responsible to not only the listeners, Doug, and to you as my friend, and V as my friend, and to all those who are, quote, close to me. I'm responsible to do whatever I can to anybody. And that's why I put up Matthew 25 today. Please read the scripture of the day, because this is Jesus talking to people that claim to be his kids, that claim to be Lord, Lord. Didn't we do this? Didn't we do that? And the thing is that, I don't think people see the significance that and I would say this, just as our action have consequences, our failure to act produces life and death. And I told somebody this the other day, and he's close to me. I said, look, brother, you can have you can decide to go basically lay down and die when they come to take you away, but you do not have the right to do that to your family. You must do everything you can, as Scripture says. Any man that doesn't provide for his family is worse than infidel. And I will tell you this right now, Doug. I personally will have nothing to do with anybody that even hints at that type of attitude in a life and death situation, because it can't be counted on. It's kind of like, you got to know who you can count on. I have cast my lot with the wrong people in life just because they had the title Christian, they said they believed, and one of them even went so far as giving me a money for the ministry and then wanting it back when he no longer liked me. I said, you gave it unto the Lord, and I gave it to where you told me to give it. So the point being is this, is that we got to get over these quirky, absolute childlike behaviors of irresponsibility, apathy, indifference, laziness, and irresponsibility, and figure out that none of that stuff is going to be rewarded. And if you live in that world, I would encourage you to check and see. I don't believe in a mental assent to salvation. I believe that when a person accepts Jesus Christ, gets baptized in the water, gets baptized in the Holy Spirit, that there is a transformative event that takes place in their life. You were one thing, you now are another.
That's why John the Baptist said, hey, I'm not going to baptize you guys, I'm paraphrasing, until you bring me forth fruit worthy of repentance. And so what we've done is we have given a sloppy agape. That was a charismatic term years back, but we've made it so easy when becoming a disciple of Jesus is easy to accept the Lord. But the bottom line is that in this world we will have tribulation. Now, I'm sorry Jesus said that. I don't hear him saying, well, don't worry, you're out of here at the first sign of trouble. We're so far into the lateness of the hour and the end of the age that I don't know, and this is V's own call, your call, Doug, and my call, and Hawk, and anybody else who's on talk radio, Alex, and I don't know everybody who's on talk radio, Shannon Davis, the people that are out there, and I'm not aiming at elevating anybody or denigrating anyone. I just don't know that much because I don't listen to talk radio. It's because I don't have any time to. But the point being is this, is that everybody should take a mental checklist or a written checklist and just ask yourself, how long could I last if what I have in the bank, and obviously we don't have any money in the bank, that's not an issue, but how long could I last in my pantry? If someone said to me, I only have $5,000, that's all the money in the world, what would you buy? I'd tell them never, 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 never buy metals until you've bought the food, until you've bought, the necessary personal survival items. I've said that for 35 years, so I don't change my tune. And the thing is I remember when I used to tell people to buy food, they thought, quote, you sell fear to sell food. Why is it that if your plumbing plugs up, you hire a plumber so you can flush the toilet? Why is it if your lights go out and you blow a fuse or a circuit breaker and it won't reset, you got to call an electrician? But you see, there's this disconnect in what people accept. Or I love this one. Here's the biggest lie that I've ever heard in my entire year. Well, I just trust God that when the time comes, he'll see me through. And I asked him this. I said, brother, do you ever go to the dentist? Well, yes. I said, but why aren't you trusting God? Well, because this is a physical thing, okay? I said, do you ever go to the doctor? Well, yeah. Well, why do you go to the doctor? He said, well, because I needed some antibiotics or I needed this or that. You can take it, Doug, to whatever degree you want. My question then begins, then why will you not act and do what you can do while you can do it? And if you won't trust God for the little things, and this is what I'll say to everybody, those of you who take that attitude, and I see it all the time, well, I'm just going to trust God. You don't do it now. What makes you think you can do it at the worst time in your life, at the worst time in history, when there's nobody to call on the phone, when there's nobody to run to, where there's no place to go? Who are you going to call? And that's why I love my favorite prayer is 4 letters in front of Jesus. For, to, and Jesus. Help me, Jesus. Because again, Doug, that's what it boils down to. Enough of the mental gyrations, the arguments, the denials, the positive, this, that, and the other thing. Positive confession does not spare you from a shooting gallery. If you're up against a wall, a firing squad, the idea is to never get up there, But the point being, it's like the guy who's going to get shot. He says, if I just close my eyes and hum a few bars, I won't hear it coming, I won't see it coming, and guess what? I won't be killed. Want to bet he doesn't fare very well? Go ahead, V.
V, before you even start, let me just double-check a date that you mentioned. April 13th of this year, correct, is when the meeting was held with the bank, the bankers, the controllers, and then the following day, the 14th, I think it was, is when the metals smackdown occurred. That was the 14th of April of 2013, right?
Yeah, I believe so, yes, if I remember correctly.
Okay. The reason I asked that is for Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, I had done a solo program myself going through the Illuminati. Yeah, I just want to bring people's attention to the April 14th to 15th, actually, April 14th, 15th, 1912, and the sinking of the Titanic. And don't forget the most powerful bankers or the most powerful, wealthiest people who would oppose the bankers' plan of centralization, would oppose the Federal Reserve, perished on that unsinkable boat in 2 hours and 40 minutes, the boat that couldn't sink. But I just wanted to mention that because we talked a lot about the symbolism of the Illuminati, numbers, dates, and there it is. A coincidence? Well, we'll leave that up to you to decide. But go ahead, V. I just want to throw that out there.
You know, the thing is, people have to understand is, like, you know, our whole reputation, who we are as a nation, is a joke, and it's been pretty much been thrown in the toilet bowl. I mean, just recently, the Prime Minister of India has said that Russia and China are India's most important partners in trade and regional stability, not the U.S. Right now, the BRICS are, again, continuing to set up not only their own bank, but their own internet system, because of this whole entire NSA snooping and spying. I mean, people are sick of it. It's an embarrassment. We're like a bratty kid that nobody wants to play with anymore on the playground. It's no longer cute. It's annoying, and that's the position we've come to. Nobody wants to deal with us, and we're an incredible joke. And the fact that everything that comes out of the mainstream is an absolute lie. I mean, you know, September's BLS report of the supposed 148,000 new jobs that were created. I mean, it's a joke, folks, because when you look at the real numbers, and I think it was John Williams from Shadow Stats, who I follow, because I love how the man's an incredible statistician, and he knows how to re-engineer the real numbers. John Williams stated that 50,000 of those 148,000 jobs were just phantom jobs, and what that simply means is basically jobs that were produced by the birth death model during difficult economic times. It's just a gross overestimation of the numbers of jobs from businesses and startups, and totally underestimates job losses from business failures. And what do you have today? You have tremendous amounts of business failures. You know, so this is where things are going. And it doesn't take a rocket scientist to see how these things will end up. I mean, the decline of the dollar is unprecedented. And it's something that the rest of the world, again, like I said before, is going away from. The world is moving away from using the dollar to settle any sort of international account. Now, folks, here's a little fact for you. You know, months ago when I came on the Hagmann Hagmann show, I said the biggest buyers of U.S. debt were China, and when I first came on, I said it was the Federal Reserve and China. Okay, the two biggest buyers of U.S. debt. Well, that's not even the case anymore, because over the course of successive months, I've detailed how the Chinese were dumping here, the Chinese were dumping there. A couple of months or so ago, them and the Japanese dumped about $40 billion in U.S. Treasuries in 1 week. Guess who is the biggest buyers, the number one and number two biggest buyers of U.S. debt?
I know.
Go ahead.
I know.
Go ahead, Doug.
It can't be Steve Quayle. No, it's the Fed. It's us. We are.
Yes, it's the Federal Reserve and the Social Security Trust Fund.
Oh man!
So what's going to happen when this hyperinflation comes hitting home, and Washington can't meet its financial obligations? Say bye-bye to your pensions, folks. It's gone. Do you see what I'm saying? Do you see how dangerous it is? I laugh because of the lunacy of these policymakers. Now, I feel horrible what's going to happen to people. You're going to lose your pensions. You're going to lose your bank accounts. You're going to lose your savings, your IRAs. Your 401ks will become 0.101ks. And then what? And then where do you go? When your country is poor, look, there's a reason why Homeland Insecurity bought 2 billion rounds of ammunition, because they know there's going to be a lot of very angry people running around in the streets. Okay? Now, that's the whole thing, folks. You got to understand, what do you do in a situation like that? We're a broke country. Okay, it's so mathematically broken. This is something that's superseding. It's going to supersede the Weimar Republic by tenfold. And that's something that people have to understand.
It's sad for the people who are stuck watching television and watching football without a clue that are going to get blindsided. And I think we all need to take this time to evaluate what we know and what we believe, and certainly take it to God. But you speak the truth, V. Steve, as well. You speak the truth. We're getting close to the close of our program. Any final thoughts we can stick in there within the next 2 minutes or so, guys?
Well, one thing I would say is this. The 1% of the population, okay, the 1% of the real big money in this country, guess what they're doing, guys? Guess what they're doing? They're buying vast amounts of gold, foreign currencies, and they're keeping things offshore. What does that tell you? And I'll end with that. Steve.
All right. Steve, how do you feel about silver? V mentioned gold, but silver? Yeah?
Well, look, for high dollar people who are going to be moving, I recommend obviously gold and platinum, but that's as a savings. For barter, the point is silver silver's half of what it was 18 months or so ago, okay? And so that's a good deal when you can buy something at a low, and know that it's been there recently. The Valcambi gold bars, Doug, seems to be one of the most popular items because people buy those because you can break off individual 1-gram gold bars. And in essence, it's a credit card-sized gold bar, 1.61 ounces, and they've got 50 individually scored 1-gram gold with the fineness. And by the way, Valcambi is one of the biggest guys in Switzerland, so this is no little small, outfit doing this. And they break off, like let's say there's 50 of them, so today they're worth about $52 a piece. So if you got to buy something for $250, you just break off 5 pieces of gold, and gold will be brought. I want to deal with a question I got too just right now because it's important in closing. There are guys who write about gold and silver that don't know anything, and let me share this because I'm just telling you point blank. You got to put your money someplace in your hand and under your control. Praying for guidance is the best thing I know, and that's what we're doing, and that's what we're trying to do. But I don't even, let's see, let me tell you who just sent this, and this is kind of an idiot argument, and I'm sorry, but it is. I think Angie sent me a letter. She said somebody who writes a newsletter, and I don't want to, take the guy on, but he said if we use silver or gold coins to buy and sell, we can be fined and or put to death in the New World Order. It has nothing to do with gold and silver. People can be put to death just because you're a Christian. And I said this to her. I said to Angie, I said, we will all be running for our lives at some point, and he's wrong. History attests against him. So do we deny Jesus because they're going to kill Christians? What they can do and would do is still in God's hands, and that's what I'm going to close. Look, we're the Lord's property. The nice thing about becoming a Christian is we no longer have to screw our lives up. We can turn it over to the Lord, and I can speak for personal experience. I know how to screw up a life, okay, my own, and I know that the only one who could set it aright and make me whole was Jesus Christ. So I'm speaking to everybody who's screwed up out there. Been there, and I'm working on it. I'm not done. I would make no boast to say except I'm yielding like I never have to the Lord. I'm trying to do what he tells me to do and what he's given me to do from the time that I first saw him face to face. He said, you'll have a Joseph's ministry and to prepare the people of God for the worst time in history. I've been doing it for 43 years by the grace of God, and I pray that some of you people will start to be as faithful as you evidently think everybody should be against your standard, and ask yourself this: how do you measure up in the Lord's eyes? Those of you who haven't been commissioned by him but have been either disobedient or just decided, I don't want to pay the price. Doug, thank you. God bless you. V, God bless you. Ladies and gentlemen, we pray for you. And Pastor Langford and I don't know, Doug will post it, but please turn into Daniel Holdings tomorrow. You can go on Doug's website, his site's there, go to my radio link, and we'll be talking about the stuff that is coming after all this stuff. And it'll be talking about fallen angels, the veils, stargates, dimensional portals, and all that stuff. And that, by the way, is people really, really want to know that stuff. Good night, everyone.
Thank you, Steve, and good night. V, thank you so much for your time tonight. God bless you, my friend. Get better.
One thing I definitely want to say, Doug, is this. Oftentimes I get emails, people saying, well, where's the collapse? I look like a fool. I'm buying gold and silver. My family looks at me like I'm crazy because this collapse I'm talking about hasn't happened. Folks, the collapse is happening. The economy is contracting, and it's contracting now. It's happening all around you. And I'll close with that.
That's fantastic. Wow, what a bite of reality. Indeed it is. Your website, V, is roguemoney.net. Of course, I'm telling you, right? roguemoney.net. And for the price of a cup of coffee a month, you can subscribe to the articles. Well, actually, less than a cup of coffee a month. And I want to thank you for your time tonight, and thank you for your sharing of knowledge. And God bless you, my friend, and get better. You still sound like you're still a little bit under the weather. So
a little bit. God bless, brother. Thank you.
All right. Take care. Folks, that'll do it for us tonight, the 24th day of October 2013. I'm Doug Hagmann. Tomorrow night, Joe Hagmann will be back, hopefully. Kind of miss a little guy sitting across from me. Well, not so little, actually. And Nathan Leal. That's Nathan Leal tomorrow night for the entire program. His website is the Watchman's Cry. And we'll put up a promotion for that. In fact, we're working on populating our website with some exclusive content concerning things that you need to know about. And hopefully that'll be done in the next 24 hours. It's just never enough time, It's just it's really crazy. But folks, I want to thank you, each and every one of you, for your belief, your trust in us, for hanging with us, for staying with us, for believing in us, and for spreading the word about the program. Just want to say God bless you and stay safe. Good night, everyone.